Good evening. I'll call to order the Arvada City Council workshop for September 28th, 2020. Kristen Resch, will you do the roll call? Here.
Here.
Here. Here.
Councilmember Simpson.
Here.
Mr. Pfeiffer.
I'd like to move to excuse Mayor Pro Tem Miller from tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Simpson, if you'll cast your vote. All votes are cast. That passes 6-0. Ms. Miller indicated she would not be with us tonight, so she is excused. Mr. Devon, we've got 3 workshop items that I understand are going to take about 10 minutes apiece. So,
I believe, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, it will take longer than that, but we will be as expeditious and as thorough as possible at the same time. The first one is going to be an update on our bond projects, and I believe Director of Public Works, Don Wick, is going to lead us off.
very good. Yes, these are serious matters, and we want to spend an appropriate amount of time on them.
Well, good evening, Mayor, members of council. Thanks for having us tonight. There's a couple of things that I want to introduce our topic to. We are going to talk about and update you all on the bond projects, some really important work that we're doing here in the city. And the other thing that I would like to do before we get kicked off is I'd like to introduce to you our interim city engineer. I don't think anybody's really had the opportunity to meet Jacqueline Rhodes yet. So she's here tonight along with the rest of the team that are project managing all of our projects. And we thought it was important for you all to be able to see them and meet them and be able to be face-to-face with us as we talk through how we're progressing on the bond projects. So I'd like to introduce to you tonight Jacqueline Rhodes. She'll come up and speak a little bit about her background to you and then introduce the rest of the team.
Very good. Good
Well,
evening.
thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. It's a pleasure to be here this evening, and I'd like to start by introducing myself, Jacqueline Rhodes. Under Mr. Wick's leadership, as I mentioned, I'm acting city engineer, and I'm excited to present to you today not only the update on the bond projects, but our delivery team. If we could go into the next slide, we'll cover some basic items, project overview for the projects we're covering today, the delivery status, including the project team, schedule and budget, and strategic alignment and takeaways. So on the next slide, just provides an overview of the 3 projects we'll be covering. And we're about to introduce our project management team, but on the whole, in November 2018, the citizens of Arvada approved these bond projects, including the 72nd Avenue from Kipling to Sims and Ralston Road Phase 2. We also want to present to you Ralston Road Phase 1, Upham to Yukon, for continuity. As Phase 2 comes into construction in early next year, it'll be a continuation of Phase 1. I want to start today in the next slide by presenting, taking a step back and thinking about project delivery. So we have our project management team here today, and I want to remind everybody that there are 2 different delivery approaches being used for these bond projects. A traditional design build approach and a construction manager general contractor approach. And while these delivery mechanisms look similar from a contractual basis in that the city and the owner has independent contracts with both the design team and the general contractor, what isn't shown here in the second schematic is that dashed line between our design team and our construction management team and bringing that construction manager on board during the design phase to help us with delivery. So in the next slide, I just want to present some really high-level takeaways of these different approaches. In the traditional design build approach, we have a really well-defined relationship with our contractor as set during that design phase in our contract documents. We tend to have high competition during that bidding phase for a lower initial cost, and we have direct input in that design. Now, some of the perceived disadvantages for this approach is that we do select based off of lowest bid. This can take more time as we tend to go through that sequential approach, going through the full design phase, contract documents, and then bringing on board the contractor. And it can be perceived as less collaboration during design. By comparison in the next slide, for the CMGC approach, really it helps us expedite the schedule. Overall, we can provide cost transparency with the guaranteed maximum price cost model. And having that contractor at the table during the design process helps us kind of streamline that input and review process and bring key constructability issues to the table earlier in the process. We can select that contractor based on quals, of which price can be a component. And again, we're increasing collaboration by bringing those issues to the table during the design process. Some of the perceived disadvantages for this approach is that, there is a large fraction of the work that is self-performed by the contractor, which might reduce competitiveness. But again, the overall benefit of this approach is that we can really expedite the schedule, identify early work packages, early procurement items that help us move the schedule quickly, which was important for the 72nd Avenue project. The reason why I wanted to take a step back and just introduce this before we dove into the details of each project is you're going to see this is really important for our 72nd Avenue bond project, as well as our raw water pump station and pipeline project for the Ralston water treatment plant. So just be keeping this in mind as we think about overall schedule and delivery. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to our first project manager, Chris Lisberg. In the next slide, he'll kick it off for Ralston Phase 1 updates.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me this evening. I'm Chris Lisberg, of course. I've had the pleasure of being at the city since February of this year. Excuse me. I have about 15 years of design experience over on the consulting side, so it's a real pleasure to be serving here at the city, neighbor of my own community. Next slide, please. As Jacqueline touched on before, Ralston Road Phase 1 is not necessarily a bond project, but is almost, basically physically married to Phase 2. Of course, and while we are much further along in the process than those two projects, we do still have an active team that's working on the delivery of that project. Of course, several individuals here at the City of Arvada, also our project partners over at CDOT, but also our contractor and the supporting engineering services such as Roxol, SCH, and Terracon. This evening, I definitely want to touch base with the status of construction to this date, our schedule moving forward, budget, and of course, also talking about some of the challenges that we've seen out there on the site with subsurface utility engineering. Next slide, please. As far as status goes, I think that most individuals can see that with their own eyes as they drive through the site. We've had a significant amount of work that's taken place on the northeast portion of the project, a lot of the concrete flat work and such. The contractor has moved around a bit as we've seen hiccups and delays along the way. So you will see intermittent construction along the south portion as well. And then we've also recently accomplished the installation of the storm sewer up on the northwest portion of the project from basically Old Wadsworth to Yukon. Now you also currently see them out there pouring concrete, whether it be curb and gutter and sidewalk, in anticipation of paving that's going to occur next month. As far as budget goes, and my estimation as far as work completed, we're at about 25 to 30% level. Very happily going to be taking some leaps forward here in the near future with some significant paving taking place in the fall. Next slide, please. Here I just have a rough calendar with some exact dates of our milestones that are quickly approaching. From October 5th to October 19th via an intermittent closure, we anticipate closing the northern half of the intersections through the corridor so that we can remove and pave remove the existing paving and put down some new asphalt. In early November, we're anticipating a traffic shift onto that new pavement so we can commence work down below, and in December, right before winter, we're anticipating removal and repaving of the southern half of the corridor. Obviously, throughout the winter, we are anticipating weather, so work will primarily focus on the median constructions out there along the bracket Old Wadsworth, and then as well as some of the miscellaneous work that was left undone in the quick moving of the fall. As temperatures warm, we anticipate doing the top lift of paving along with striping, and then of course construction completion should be coming on the heels of that with items such as landscape restoration. I do want to point out that there are a lot of avenues that people have been engaging and reaching out to the city, whether it be our public information officer on the project, the city itself, Ask Arvada, phone calls, websites, and we always welcome the coordination and the conversation with everyone along the corridor. Next slide, please. Of course, an update on the budget. As far as design and right-of-way goes, those items have been closed for quite some time now. As far as construction goes, as we've gotten into things and we've seen some delays, we are incurring some additional costs due to those delays. Some of that has come from errors and omissions in the plans, a little bit of shortfall that we saw at the initiation of construction, as well as some surprises as we've unearthed one of the oldest parts in town to install storm sewer and some other underground items. Working with the finance group, including Dawn and Jacqueline, we have been able to identify some funds from another project that we transferred over to cover these shortfalls, and we are proceeding with a forecasted overage in construction of $450,000.
Can I ask you a quick question about that?
Yes, sir.
So how much of that was impacted by your SUE requirements?
Or the lack of following them.
No, there's state laws, you're going to have to follow them, but how much more impact were to the budget based on the state law requiring your SUE details to be gathered? And then what was there an issue between what you thought you knew out there versus what was there?
So to handle those questions in two separate items, so the SUE legislation, as I understand the time frame of this project as it unfolded during design, the SUE legislation was passed at a time in which the decision was made not to follow SUE legislation. From my estimate of the design packages and the paperwork, I'm not finding that it quite lived up to the SUE legislation as required. So in my estimation of cost, I would advise that at this time, we're probably at that break-even point. If we had invested in SUE before, it would likely be equal to what we've seen in overages due to SUE right now. So I think this is kind of the tipping point. If we continue to find significant surprises underground and incur costs, that might tell the tale on if that should have been done or not.
And what kind of surprises are you finding?
We found that the city's storm sewer network was different than what was anticipated. And that's through several iterations that I can tell from in the 50s, and I think in the 80s we might have gone in and modified the network. I've seen irrigation ditch pipe work that's run for a couple hundred feet underneath the northern portion of the sidewalk. We've come across it in several locations and had to pull that out. A lot of utilities are quite shallow throughout that corridor. Some of them quite old, you can imagine, and some of them more modern.
Yeah, and was any of it abandoned?
The irrigation ditch was abandoned. The irrigation pipe was abandoned. We have found two gas lines that were abandoned. That's all that comes to mind.
And this is just that small section right now, right? Of
Oh.
Ralston Road?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Marion.
I just had a quick question about actually your previous slide about the time frame. The question I get most frequently is when will regular turns, left turns, be allowed into the streets along in Old Town? So Upham and Webster and of course Old Wadsworth too. I know you're about to shift, but after that shift happens, will there be the ability for people to make left turns there?
We believe that at the conclusion of fall here in about late December, we anticipate traffic being opened up to the entire corridor. Of course, they're going to get in and do the construction of the medians at one point, and we'll have to have some special cases there to allow for the lefts. But holistically, from winter on, we anticipate, with obviously intermittent interruptions, that those lefts will be permitted again.
But the shift to the north side and beginning work on the south side, that won't allow left turns?
I don't believe so at this time, but that's definitely something I've challenged T&M to be able to address.
Okay.
So we only anticipate getting about 28 feet of pavement out there, which if we squeeze things down, I think would still be a little dangerous and a little tight for lefts in that vicinity.
Right. Okay. Just so your team knows, that's the most frequently requested thing I hear from both the patrons of Old Town, the residents of Old Town and around that area, and then the businesses in Old Town. All of them are desirous of the same thing. And obviously, we can only do it if it's safe. But if there is a way to do that safely, it seems like that's an important thing to all the stakeholders and interested parties there. So
Understood. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, next slide, please. Last but not least, I was asked to speak just a few minutes about the SUE that Bob asked about. Here you have laid out the quality levels that the SUE legislation advises on. This has been a longstanding ASCE requirement or guideline for design projects. Just like grades in grade school, as you get up towards A, it gets better. But of course, from a cost feasibility perspective, we can't get quality level A on everything. So often we start at D with the existing maps that we have on hand or that the private utilities may have as well, along with quality level C being survey of known features above the surface that you can see, B being some ground penetrating radar and other technologies that are quite fascinating, and then the good old fashioned potholes via quality level A, in which the utility is exposed and we can see it with our own eyes and estimate its size and shoot its depth. Again, this measure can, as I alluded to with my discussion, my brief discussion on the balance of costs and investing in design versus finding out things surprisingly in construction, it is a careful choice to utilize this legislation or to utilize these resources when it's not dictated by legislation. Investigations are no real guarantee of conflict avoidance, but in some cases, the true experts advise that $1 spent in design can save you and $4 worth of surprises out in the field. So we as an engineering team are significant advocates of the legislation as we don't like surprises because we're engineers after all. So, but with that, if there's no other questions, I'd love to move on to the broad projects and introduce Trang Tran, of course.
Very good. Thank you.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, and colleagues. My name is Trang, and I've been at the city since June of 2016. And prior to joining the city, I have approximately 6 years of experience through the private sector, through land development. And so I am pleased to be here tonight to present to you some updates for the first of the 2 bond projects tonight. Next slide, please. Our Ralston Road Phase 2 project consists of Felsberg Hall and Overage. They are the design engineer and landscape architect. In addition to our prime designer, we also have several sub consultant helping us on the design as well, and they are Goodby and Associate. They are responsible on the utilities, specifically helping us with quality level B for the SUE legislation. We'll have Aztec and also HCPAC to help us in negotiations of the right-of-way. For geotechnical, we have QMAR on board. Also lighting and irrigation, they are BCA and hydro systems respectively within our team. Next slide, please. I'll briefly discuss with you our project status in addition to our schedule and also the budget. Currently, our design engineer is working on the addressing our 90% plan comments and also on our project specification. In the next several weeks, actually, they will be finalizing the plans and also the project special conditions so that we could go out to bid. We are anticipating to advertise for construction by the end of the year, and that is contingent on the right-of-way acquisition. In regard to the project budget, we have spent approximately 15% of the project budget of $17,883,000, mostly on the right-of-way settlement and also the associated costs with right-of-way in terms of the cost for the appraisal on the landowner side and also the city side, and also on the design services. Next slide, please. In this slides right here, we are summarizing in more detail the budget with respect to the 90% cost estimate. As currently designed, we are within budget of the $21+ million in addition to the ORA funding that earlier this week City Council has approved the IGA for the design and construction of the streetscape elements for the corridor. As you could see, we do have identified approximately $1.3 million in contingency for both of the roadway and also the streetscape construction as well. Unfortunately, during the last about 2 years, the right-of-way costs and also construction costs have increased dramatically. And in addition to these costs, we do have additional scope added to the project in regards to adding the fiber interconnect to all of the new traffic signals. We are upgrading some of the storm sewers that doesn't meet current city criteria, and also updating the fire hydrants and potentially relocating approximately 3,700 feet of 12-inch water so that we could construct 6 medians to meet the arterial street classification of the city criteria. While we have these additional scope added to the project, we are still maintaining that 5-year deadline to finish the project by February of 2024. Next slide, please. So on the left side of the slides, it show what potentially could look in front of City Hall. In that we'll have raised medians, we'll have trees and tree grates on both sides of the street. At Wolf Park, we will have some enhancement in the park as well. And we are working actually with the Arvada Arts and Commission to create some sort of a competition so that local artists could have their work be displayed at Wolf Park once the construction is finished. So in addition to having medians, we'll also have monuments at most of the intersection, as well as pedestrian lighting. We did request for Aura to include the lighting, not with just phase 2, it's actually phase 1 as well. So when the project is done, we'll have pedestrian lighting all the way from Upham to Garrison Street. Next slide, please. For this slide right here, our GDS group has created a right-of-way dashboard in which shows our progress on the right-of-way acquisition. For the yellow slides right there, we do have approximately 10 properties that have settled with the city and have recorded at the county as being settled, and we have acquired that right-of-way through negotiation. For the orange and also the green, we do have landowners signing the memorandum of agreement to settle with the city. Unfortunately, we do have 2 properties that we have to file for condemnation so that we could take immediate possession in order for the right-of-way to start. And then for the blue, approximately 40% of the 49 properties that we have to acquire. We are still in negotiation, so hopefully we'll settle them through negotiation rather than file for condemnation. Next slide, please. So the next steps would be actually to accomplish a few milestones for this project. In the next month or so, Excel will begin the overhead conversions of the utilities. In addition to Excel, Comcast and CenturyLink also have overhead utilities as well. And as I mentioned earlier, the consultant is working now to address our comments so that they could finalize the plans and also the project specs so that we could go out to bid by the end of the year. And again, in order to advertise for construction, we are expecting to settle on most of our right-of-way through the end of the year. And so, again, that leads to the advertisement for construction. And then, obviously, we'll have bid opening in the first quarter of 2021, preferably in January, February, so that we could have a start date no later than May of 2021. In order for the project to be completed approximately 6 to 9 months ahead of schedule of 2024. And obviously with phase 1, we'll also have an open house prior to construction so that we'll have the opportunity for the community to come and ask us questions, in terms of the impact, and also look at the phasing plan of what we have proposed, so that the impact will be minimal for the next 2.5 years when the first phase is done, and then the second phase will start soon after that.
Right. About what percentage of the overhead utilities are going to get underground?
So right now, on the south side, it's actually between Garrison to Allison. So I would say that's approximately half a mile. And then once that portion is done, and then actually Xcel Energy would switch to the north side as well, between Garrison to about Cody Court. That will be their main transmission line. That will be the overhead line on the north side. So there will be work on both sides of the corridor.
So will most everything be underground at that point?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we'll also underground on the east side of Allison as well, from Roston Road to 59th Avenue by the park here, in which we're picking up the overhead lines that is a part of the parks maintenance project. That is, I believe the city is wrapping up soon for a October completion day, I believe.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And,
Mr. Marriott?
Actually, if you want to finish, I'll ask you a question when you're done.
actually, that's my
That's it, okay,
slide,
so
yep.
just a quick question, just so people know what to expect. Once the construction part of the project starts, so the part that disrupts traffic, not the undergrounding that they can work on the edges, but the actual physical construction, will that be the whole corridor all at once, so they'll be working everywhere between Yukon and Garrison, or will it start on one side and progress to the other side?
So for right now, our phasing plan, our design engineer is suggesting to start on the east side going westward. As of right now, to give our contractor the flexibility, the city will not tell them, whether it's in the north side or the south side. So when we have a contractor on board, we'll work with them to discuss some of the difficulty of, which side to start. But right now, the way that our construction phasing is planned, I believe we're going to start on the north side first, and then once the north side is done, and then start on the south side, because that also impact the right-of-way of the temporary construction easement. Even though it takes 2 years for the project to be completed, for the temporary easement, we are going to pay upfront for just 1 year, so that if we obviously rent for a total of 2 years, that doesn't make sense financially. So that's what we're going to do.
Right. So you're saying you'll start the plan, at least now, although it's subject to change, would be to start on the east side, on the north side of Ralston Road,
Mm-hmm.
and progress your way down to Garrison, not close up, not do the whole north side all the way to Garrison all at once, where that whole amount of traffic is diverted, or am I wrong? Am I reading that wrong?
So right now, we are going to maintain one lane in each direction, unless it's during an emergency where we have a complete shutdown or actually doing night work. We're following the same way that we're doing with phase one lane in each direction. And
Okay.
also maintaining access to all of the businesses, doing normal business hour, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
Right. I guess I'm trying to get an idea on the left turns things. Seems to be the biggest disadvantage or negative for the public who uses that and the businesses that are there. And will it be all the streets from Yukon to Garrison all at once that will lose their left turns, or will it progress its way so some of that'll stay open for some period of time?
I think, again, until, we get a contractor
Right.
on board, they obviously the expert, and of course, we'll keep that in mind as well.
Right.
With all of the construction, with any project, obviously safety and convenience, the two, most important criteria in terms of what should we do.
Right.
So we'll obviously update council once we get to that point.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm just
And-
constantly amazed at the number of people that don't know when it says no left turn, they still will stop there, have cars pile up behind them, honking their horns. I mean, it's been crazy to watch.
Okay. So I'll turn over to Bill now to talk about 72nd Avenue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
Evening.
Well, as the newest member of the team here, I've been here since June. Been on this project for about 5 weeks now. I was assigned this project upon Jacob Beagle's departure. So it's been a baptism by fire, needless to say, to get into all the issues on the largest of the bond projects here. So this evening I do plan to talk, next slide please. I have quite a few items, but we're running a little short on time, so I'll try to expedite some of this. I plan to talk about the budget and schedule, a little bit about the UPRR coordination along with our PUC application. We'll get briefly into the right-of-way acquisition, and we'll touch base on the noise study and the technical memorandum that came out after our noise study, and then I will end the presentation with a neighborhood interaction that we've had to date. The next slide, please. As you can see, we have a really strong team. This is CMGC. Jacqueline alluded to earlier that it's a little bit different process than design, bid, build. This particular delivery system requires a lot of coordination among design engineer, owner, contractor, and all the sub-consultants. We do have a very strong team, a very reputable team with Mueller and HDR, and then SEMA is, this is in their sweet spot in terms of doing projects of this size and scope. Shannon Wilson is our geotech, and just as Trang's project, Goodby and Associates will be doing our utilities along with HKS, who will be doing the SUE investigation or SUE investigation. Peck is our right-of-way consultant, and then finally Altig is our owner's representative. They're helping us out through some of the challenges up front to try to deliver this system or this project within budget and scope and time. Next slide, please. Some of our ongoing tasks, I guess I should say this is a little different delivery system. It's divided up into 3 packages in the construction side of it. And so we're going to deliver this a little bit different than design, bid, build. We will develop construction package 1. We're at about 75% on that package. It will be staggered a little bit with construction package 2, which will come in late November. I might mention construction package 1, 90% will come around late October. And then finally, construction package 3 will really depend on the results of our PUC application and our continuing work with UP. And then right-of-way acquisition continues. To date, I believe we've issued 39 notice of intents. We plan on completing that in the next 2 months. So all of those will be sent through me for my signature, and they'll be sent out. So that is ongoing. We hope to wrap that up by the end of the year and have a lot of the right-of-way in place. I will finally mention demolition status of the homes, 3 homes on the east side. We have demolished 2 of those. We have 1 more that will be demolished. The owner and occupant of that particular home has asked for an extension due to just the lack of the ability to find a suitable home in the relocation package that they had in place. So we have granted them an extra 6 months to find that suitable home. Next slide, please. So this touches base on our schedule. You can kind of see in the lower side of that how the CP1 is our utilities relocation package. We plan to get that underway the first of the year. We will start reviewing costs at about 90% in late October. We will then develop a probable opinion of probable construction costs. We'll also develop an independent cost estimate. With that, we'll compare those 2 and come up with a negotiated unit price and a final price that will ultimately run through council for approval. That's the same system that will happen for construction package 2 and construction package 3 as well. To date, our budget, we've spent about 7% of our total bond budget on this particular project. And so we're in pretty good shape. I guess that will increase as we get more into construction. And I think we can hit a significant portion of that 85% by 2/26/22. Next slide, please. As you see in the pie chart, we've hit about 7%. This is a right-of-way dashboard that shows some of the activities going on with right-of-way. But from this particular slide, I'd say that's more important to look at our risk concerns. So obviously, some high-risk items are the work that we're doing with Union Pacific Railroad, the PUC application process, and then I guess a physical risk would be the high water table out on the site where the underpass will be constructed. Over on the public relations side, we are dealing with a lot of interaction with the citizens. We're trying to develop a point of contact at the city so that our team doesn't get individual calls, and we're trying to develop a message at the city that where we can have one point of contact for all the residents along that corridor who call us. So that's ongoing. I think we have that in place. We have a mailer in place as well that's going to be sent out for all the, prior to the notice of intent so that the public has some idea of what's going on. Next slide, please. So this budget bar graph that you see before you just really indicates where we are in each individual budget. I'd say the highest usage to date is for our design. We're at about 70% of our design fees being spent. Our plans are at about 75% for CP1 and CP2. We've halted CP3 at about 60% until we get feedback from Union Pacific Railroad. So that's the major structure. We really can't go beyond 60% on that design until we get some input back from Union Pacific Railroad. So we've halted that. We don't really want to progress that along and use up all of our budget and then get comments back from the railroad that would require us to start over and use more budget that we have on hand. Construction budget, you see we haven't touched that, of course, and in owner's rep, that's been very minor. We're really at about 8% on that, and the pre-con is pretty much exhausted. That particular budget was Alteg, that's the SEMA pre-con construction contract, which was for $530,000, incremented out into 10 payments. And so that's for all the activity that the contractors had to go through to coordinate all the pre-construction activities along with design engineer and with the city as well. So that coordination has been great to date. It's really going to help save on the back end. And so we feel that that's money well spent. Next slide, please. Right now, the settlement amount that we've had on our right-of-way is about $1.4 million. And you see the pie chart over on the left that the colors are representative of the activity that's going on. We have sent out a lot of notice of intents, so there's a lot of activity along the corridor. There's just a few that we haven't touched base yet in the white. And so that all will come, I guess, to a close in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Next slide, please. So to get into the challenge of all of this, working with Union Pacific and the PUC, as I'm sure the council well knows that we were rejected for the proposed underpass back in April. So that prompted the city to look at alternative ways to get this underpass approved. So we hired an attorney to take us through the Public Utilities Commission process. That application is currently underway. We're at about 99% completion on that application. We hope to have that filed this week. I would say in the meantime, Union Pacific did reach back out to us to set up an appointment or a meeting for October, which we've accepted. And so we plan to have that meeting on October 21st. We have about 8 to 10 people at the city who will be attending that. And then we have some of our consultant staff who will be attending that as well. So we hope, along with the PUC application and what comes out of this meeting, we can get an agreement for an underpass to get started mid next year. The PUC process is about a 120-day process. The decision will be final. And we have applied for a 50-50 allocation on the cost of the theoretical structure, which is around $20 million. If we actually have an agreement with Union Pacific before that happens, Union Pacific will be on the hook for about 5% or about $1 million of the theoretical structure. So there is some motivation, I believe, on UP's side to come to an agreement with us. So we're very optimistic that we will get this approved and get this started midpoint of next year. So it has been a complicated process, and we will submit that PUC application by the end of this week. We are very hopeful. Next slide, please. The noise study, that seems to be something that gets brought up a lot as I interact with a lot of the citizens along the corridor. I think a lot of that is the existing noise. that's happening out there today. Next slide, please. So we hired HDR engineers to do a noise study back in September of last year. And so they developed a zone for this particular noise study and put out 5 noise sensors to collect noise in half-hour increments back in September. They developed a model. This particular model is a predictive model, like most engineering models. We have certain inputs that we put in. We use the physics of how noise travels, and then it predicts what the noise will be at every residence within that zone. And so what this model indicated that there were really no impacts, or very little impact currently, and it predicts out to 2040 as well for no action alternatives and the full build-out alternative. And so within this model, we found that there were only 6 homes that were impacted above 66 decibel levels. Now, 66 decibel levels, if you see the chart on the right, that's a running lawnmower in your backyard, or it's a vacuum on the inside of your house. So it is quite loud. However, that is the threshold that we look at, or this model looks at, to indicate whether or not we need to build any kind of noise remediation or abatement. So it predicted out in 2040 that there were 3 homes impacted near Quail, and there were 3 homes impacted that were demolished over on the east end. So those are gone. 1 still remaining, but it will be gone. The 3 at Quail and 72nd were modeled for walls. And so this particular model found out that it didn't meet the criteria to build noise walls. So there are many reasons why it doesn't meet the criteria, but we then hired Altig, our owner's representative, to go look at that study and see if the input for that report was correct and the output was correct. And they found, they did come to the same conclusion that it was a valid study, and so no further remediation for noise was needed. Next slide, please. So, as you can see, is my last slide here. This is our interaction with the neighborhood. The darker colors means more interaction, of course. And you can see that there are a couple that are very dark, 6 to 8 interactions. The Grange over on the northwest corner of Sims and 72nd Avenue required a lot of negotiation. I think we're about to get our notice of intent signed on that one. Some of the things that most of the residents indicated were a traffic noise, of course, and then some were upset over the loss of property. There were a few that were very upset over loss of trees. And so, and one resident was a little concerned with how close the roadway would be to their new backyard location, which I think we took 5 or 10 feet from them. So these are the primary concerns of the residents that we've had interaction with. And we'll continue to work with the residents all the way through this process to try to address their concerns. Next slide, please. So I guess I'm going to maybe open it up for questions, and then if there are no questions, I'll turn it back over to Jacqueline to talk about some of the key takeaways.
Great. I don't see any questions yet, see if anybody does, but I want to publicly thank Senator Rachel Zinzinger for helping us out with a letter to get some movement with the PUC and the railroad to get, at least I think that helped lead to this meeting that's going to happen on October 21st. And so I want to publicly thank the Senator for helping us out with that. I don't see any other questions.
Okay, very good. I'll turn it back over to Jacqueline.
Great.
Okay, takeaways. Ralston Road Phase 1 is on track for our spring 2021 completion. Following that, Ralston Road Phase 2, while we're nearing final design, we hope to get that out for a bid at the end of the year with construction to basically fold right in to begin in spring 2021 as well. As you just heard from Bill, 72nd Avenue design is progressing. We're at various stages between 60 and 90. We're still planning on construction to begin in summer 2021, and again, the benefit of that CGMC approach is that we can phase those construction packages, begin to put out that early work and procurement package. But a lot of this does depend in the third package on the Union Pacific coordination. So I'd like to close it out by giving you my sincere thanks. I think this is really valuable for my team to be able to put our face to our names, and given that so many of us are new, It was a great opportunity for us to come in here today and share our project updates. I can tell you we have a very talented team working very hard for you behind the scenes, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share our project updates with you tonight.
Very good. Thank you so very much. Anything else, Mr. What?
No, Council, thank you very much for your attention tonight. And as always, if you have any questions, please let us know. We'd be happy to talk those through with you or answer anything. Otherwise, thank you for letting us be here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've got a good team. Okay, Mr. Devon, what's next?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we're going to have a presentation on our 2021-2022 budget. We're going to start with an overview that I will be providing for you, and then we have a team of people led by Laura Gillis that will present an overview of the organization's and service effectiveness work system budget, and then Safe Community will follow after that. So if you're ready, we'll go ahead and get started.
We are ready.
Okay, so as you well know, we present to you a recommended budget. We presented the recommended budget to you on September the 11th. That was a document. This is the document here that we distributed to all of you. Started with a budget transmittal letter, the letter that gave you an overview of the budget, and then it provided. We went into detail on our work systems, 10-year financial plans, and so forth. Next slide. So we started by setting our priorities as we put together the proposed 2021-2022 budget. And our priorities started with people first. And by people first, we mean the community, the people that live here, that own businesses here, people that work here, as well as the people that work for us, our team members. We wanted to try to put together a budget despite the uncertainties associated with the pandemic and the economic consequences. We wanted to put together a budget that would afford any negative impacts as much as possible to people in our community as well as the people that work for us. That was priority number one. Priority number two was we wanted to comply with your budget and fiscal policy. We felt that we needed to comply with the requirements for fund balances, the requirements for contributions to capital projects, the requirements that are basically established in council budget policy, I think it's 300.4 that you approved back in, I think it was 2015. We wanted to ensure our continued contributions to internal service funds, our facilities, our vehicles, our technology, insurance, et cetera. Sometimes as a budget strategy, there are some communities that will look at the idea of maybe taking a holiday for a year on those contributions to those internal service funds, and we didn't want to do that. Again, that's one of the tenets of your budget and fiscal policy. We knew we would need to look at expenditure reductions, so we asked our work system leads and department heads to identify 3%, 5%, and 10% reductions. We figured that the 3% and 5% reductions could be accomplished mostly by reductions to operating funds, but we wanted to be sure of that. We wanted to test that, and we felt that if we got into a 10% reduction situation, we would be looking at service level reductions and certainly impacts to our team and to our community. So we wanted to avoid that if at all possible. And then lastly, we wanted to maintain our focus on capital projects, those strategic investments, such as what you just heard from our Public Works team, but also the other work that we're doing around streets and traffic signal replacement and things along those lines, because we see those as strategic investments into our community. Next slide. We started with some base assumptions. One of those was that the Ralston Fields urban renewal area will expire in 2028, and the revenue of about $4.5 million a year. We wanted to take that revenue, and we felt like with the issues that we were dealing with, we wanted to use that revenue to help us balance, and I'll be illustrating that a little later in the presentation. So that funding, which altogether was about a little over $9 million, is put into the plan to help us plug the operating gap. We also assumed no salary range adjustments in 2021 and again in 2024. So in that case, there is an impact to our team as a result of the no salary range adjustment, but we also knew that if we could do that, we could maintain a situation where we wouldn't have any furloughs or layoffs or anything like that associated with trying to balance the budget. We also are not projecting any steps currently for 2021. And then we were able to get another really great result, which we were able to inform you all about a few weeks ago with our healthcare program and our health insurance renewal, which came in at 0%. And so we had projected a 4% increase. So that was an assumption that actually saved us money when we got that 0% result. We were able to, again, put that into our financial plan to balance it. And then we are assuming the reduction of 3 positions in 2023 that we would accomplish through attrition. So as we progress into the implementation of our 10-year financial plan, we know we will be reducing positions, and we will be paying attention to that as we proceed.
Mr. Devon, one of the other assumptions or realities that we're not going to have that big hit for the Cadillac tax.
Correct.
And that's a pretty significant number.
That was a pretty significant number. That was actually something that we projected into our 10-year financial plan in the beginning. I constantly asked the director of finance about that, and he kept reminding me that he already put it into the 10-year financial plan. So we couldn't count it twice, as much as I tried. So that's the thing with Brian. He keeps us honest. Next slide. So you'll recall that when we started looking at the economic impacts of the public health emergency, we projected originally about a $66 million deficit for our 10-year financial plan in the general fund. So this is not $66 million in a year. That's $66 million over 10 years. But because we do 10 years financial planning, we looked at that as a challenge that we needed to deal with. And so we dealt with it. We had some updates in the model based on the actual year-end final for 2019 that helped us with address $6 million. Some revenue changes based on updated estimates that helped us with about $12.3 million. Some changes on assumptions. For example, we relooked at funding sources such as property tax, which we saw as an increase based on the tax collections, which allowed us, along with other assumptions, to assume another $34 million to reduce that $66 million deficit. And then work system changes. So most of those are the 3% budget reductions that we were able to receive from the departments through the budget meetings, which saved us, as you can see, almost $18 million to the financial plan. And then we did offset some of those with some budget adds. You will see some discussion of that as you receive the updates for the work system. But for example, one of the adds that we had was in the communications area. Under Ben's leadership, the council has made it clear they want some additional engagement and an opportunity for interaction with the community. So in order to do that, we're proposing the addition of a position to help us with that area. And, yeah.
Mr. Devon, I just want to ask you 2 questions. On the 3 positions that we'll be losing through attrition, what work systems will be affected by those?
So, Brian, do you know the answer to that off the top?
Councilmember Ford, we have not identified what work system, so what we want to do is be strategic with those positions. So we just took an average of the overall cost and put them in the model. And then the leadership team has committed to each other. As each position comes up, we will discuss whether we need to move forward with rehiring that and then move towards the 3 ultimately.
Okay. And then the other question that I had was on the work system changes where they reduced. Where do you see that affecting overall in terms of, productivity or?
Yes. So in some cases, I would say in most cases, we were able to utilize operational savings through supplies accounts and contractual accounts to account for a lot of those savings. We're also able to utilize savings for conferences and meetings because we're not going to conferences anymore. We're going to virtual conferences. So we're saving a lot of money on travel and those kinds of expenses. As those kinds of things recover in the future, assuming they do, then we'll find ways to fund those as needed. But we're able to save a lot in those areas. So what we were able to do and most of these were in the 3% reduction area, is that our team, basically scrubbed every assumption that they had made in developing their budget over the last few years and identify savings wherever they could. In a lot of cases, we also found some savings through some additional productivity measures and work processes, which saved us money as well. So we were able to put together a budget through those kinds of initiatives.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So next slide, please. So this is the general fund 10-year model, and there's lots of numbers, and this is actually the first about 3 years of the budget. We have the first the actuals from 2018 and 2019, the 2020 budget, and then the first 3 years beginning with 2021 that is on that chart. There's a lot of numbers there, but we'll cut to the chase in a second. Next slide, please. This finishes out the 10 years going through 2030. Next slide. So this is the important part. When we look at a 10-year financial plan, what we want to make sure is that at the end of the 10 years, we are fully balanced. And as you can see, our fund balance ending at the conclusion of 2030 is about 19.4 million. Our fund balance goal, which is 17% of expenditures, is 19.386. So we have, at the end of the 10 years, we are fully balanced by $21,006. So as you can see, that's not a lot of money, but it's balanced. And and as you well know, for the time that we've worked on this, a 10-year financial plan is a work in progress. We put it together at a point in time at the beginning, and then as we work through the 10-year financial plan, we make adjustments based on actual expenditures and actual revenues. But the point is that we know that based on all the assumptions that we've made with no other changes, we would be fully balanced through the end of 2030. In reality, we will be making adjustments as we go, but if you're wondering about adding anything to the budget, that $21,006 will be spent rather quickly. So that's one of the things that we need to stress, is that if we are going to anything, we'd have to take something away.
Mr. Pfeiffer?
Hey, so quick question, Mark. So trying to understand, it looks like about $1 million to $1.5 million in personnel increase year over year.
Mm-hmm.
Can you maybe explain, if we're keeping, if I remember correctly, the salaries flat, no steps,
Mm-hmm.
Why would we still see an increase in next year? And maybe you can explain that.
Well, the increases could come from salary range adjustments or from step increases. And so for the years that would be, that we project no salary increases or no salary range, no salary range adjustments or step increases, that number would be less. We still have some ongoing expenditures. Brian, is there anything you want to add to that, or Lori?
Councilmember Pfeiffer, for next year, that includes the addition of the proposed positions that you'll see coming up here in just a minute. So that's why it goes up from 2020 to 2021. And then after that, we did put back in steps and market rate adjustments for all years except 2024.
So next year, it's $1 million from this year. So 3 positions are going to equal $1 million.
There's more than that. There's more than just 3.
Okay. So, and then
There's
over,
7.
and then the 3 reduction, I should say, the 3 reduction, what's the time frame you're looking at?
So the 3 reductions we've committed to have by 2023.
23. And then I can't remember, it's what is about 7 positions? Is that what it is?
I believe we added In the general fund, I believe we added 7 positions. We added 4 police officers, partially funded by a grant. Then there's another 3 positions. I mentioned the communications positions, and then we have 2 positions in the city attorney's office to help us with mainly to help us with the bond projects and all the land acquisition.
Yeah, and that's later on, so I didn't mean to get
Right.
ahead, but
Yeah.
just was wondering the increase on personnel when we're saying no more steps or no more.
Right.
So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Mr. Marriott?
Thank you. Mr. Devon, I want to divert you just a little bit here in the middle rather than waiting for the end, but then this will be easy for you to answer, I think. But you had mentioned one of the philosophies of this budget plan is to maintain our internal service funds, to not make any changes there. So that brings to me the question of how confident are we that we're using the right plans within all those internal service funds? So I think about whether it's vehicles or information technology or any of those internal funds, and what process do we use to constantly evaluate that to determine? And again, I think about something like a vehicle, you know, the longevity and usefulness of a vehicle is different today than it was 10 years ago, or certainly 20 or 25 years ago. And are we constantly updating how we look at, you know, the replacement of those things? So that'd be the question. How do we do it, and are you confident that we're doing the right thing there?
So we look at a lot of different data. In the area of vehicles, we have a system that tracks their maintenance records, and when it gets to a certain level of maintenance, then that system alerts us to let us know that that vehicle is something that ought to be replaced based on the amount of maintenance and repair we're putting in. We do that with all of our vehicles, all of our service vehicles, our police vehicles. The system is called FASTER, and it's something that we are constantly evaluating and reevaluating to make sure that it's accurate. Same thing with technology, and you know, I think we're benefiting also right now from the fact that we've established some new leadership in many of these areas. We have a new fleet manager, we have a new director of utilities who is responsible for the fleet operation, who is relooking at those assumptions. We have a new information technology director who is relooking at the assumptions around technology and around security and those kinds of things. So we are pretty confident at what we're you know, at the assumptions that we're making, but we're always reviewing it. So as we proceed through the process of looking at it, we may be adjusting and looking at either a faster or slower replacement schedule, or some additional areas that we need to deal with, such as cybersecurity, which is one of our focuses. In fact, I think we gave you some information this last Friday that is causing us to reevaluate that. So we have we're certainly not standing pat. We're reviewing those systems all the time, but that was one of the reasons why we wanted to maintain our contributions to those internal service funds, to make sure we had the resources available to deal with these issues. And sometimes even within the replacement funds, we shift resources around as necessary to deal with the emerging issues.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide. So this is an overview of all of our financial plans, all the funds wherein we do 10-year plans, and green is good. So when you look at all of our funds on this slide, you will see that nearly all of them are meeting the requirements of our budget and fiscal policy. There are exceptions, however, and one of those is our golf fund. The Golf Operations Fund was significantly impacted by COVID-19. We had to shut down, as the council well knows, the golf courses basically in March and through April and into May before we started to reopen. And that was reopened in a limited manner. As we fully reopened, golf has gone crazy. It was almost like there was pent-up demand. We've had crazy numbers over the summer, 73% rounds increase year over year at at our golf courses, but it hasn't been enough to completely offset what occurred earlier in the year when we went basically down to zero. And of course, our restaurants, and in particular the clubhouse at Westwoods, where we have a debt service payment. Prior to the pandemic, we were really hitting our financial goals, in fact, in some cases exceeding them. And then once the pandemic hit, we had to close, basically, like so many restaurants did. We reopened for some limited business, but again, the difficulty of offsetting the time that we were closed certainly is causing us a problem. And of course, right now, our restaurants are operating at the 50% capacity level, except for outdoor dining. So that's something that we're dealing with in the golf fund. Our financial team and our golf operations team worked very hard to get the fund in the best possible position it can be. But as you can see, we don't project to become compliant with the policy until 2030. The other fund that is...
Before you do that, Mr.
Sure.
Ford. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask you, what year will the debt be paid on the golf?
On the clubhouse renovation?
Mm-hmm.
Brian, do you have that?
So it just started, so it won't pay off till 2036.
Thank you.
Okay. The other fund that we show there as not compliant with the policy is the solid waste fund, and in that case, that's the startup costs for the solid waste program and the fronting of costs for the solid waste containers and recycling containers. We did push that to get it to be compliant by 2026, and so that's the other challenge that we're facing with that particular one. And then the buildings fund, the issue there is that you may recall that you approved a contract with a company called Amoresco that is in the process of front-loading and replacing a number of building components, and that is causing the fund to reduce below the budget and fiscal policy requirements. However, that's also helping us to replace a number of building components that needed to be replaced through a financing option, and we will be bringing that fund back into compliance by 2026. So those are the exceptions that we're dealing with, and of course we also have Arvada events wherein we are going to cease operations by the midpoint of 2021. Next slide. Okay, this slide is a summary of major buckets of funding, if you will, that come from the general fund to support other operations. You can see at the very top the contributions we make to street maintenance, to parks and golf. Of course, it varies based on some of the issues that we're dealing with. During the current year, 2020, we have a sizable subsidy that the general fund is providing to golf out of necessity due to the impacts of the pandemic. Same with events because of the impacts of the retention agreements, whereas what we're providing to streets and to parks is pretty much in line with a normal budget year. We're also, the amount of money that we provide for administering the Community Development Block Grant program, which we get about $400,000 from that program, but to provide the staff and other support for that program, that costs us about $160,000 in 2020. And then in the next column or the next section below, these are general fund contributions that we provide to allied and collaborative organizations. The Arvada Center, of course, is the biggest one with over 4.3 and then 4.4 and 4.5 million dollars in 2021 and 2022 respectively. That's partially cash at about 1.6 million, and then the rest is the escalating cost for utilities and maintenance that is provided. And then the Visitor Center, we provide assistance to that program. Obviously the bid and the chamber and you can see down the line. We included the National League of Cities and Metro Mayors Caucus as examples of organizations that are advocacy and those kinds of activities. Regional Air Quality Board, DRCOG, CML. Those are examples of where we provide assistance to support city operations to outside organizations. And that's basically provided to give you all some background information about where this funding goes.
Mr. Fiver?
Mark. So with all those groups, I mean, you know, there's a lot of services that come with those groups. Staff frequently use the resources within those organizations?
Absolutely.
Other than us sitting on the boards?
Yes, absolutely. So certainly that's the case with DRCOG, as Bob, as I think you know. It's also the case, probably to a lesser extent, with the Regional Air Quality Board. You know, the National League of Cities, Metro Mayors Caucus are groups that the council is involved in, and we reap the benefits of that as well.
What about CML?
You know, again, I think CML is another example of an advocacy organization that the team actually receives benefit from as well. I mean, for example, salary surveys and model ordinances and policy analysis, policy advocacy. Oftentimes, it's CML that not only calls the council but also calls us. When SB 217 was being discussed in the at the state legislature, it was a CML policy analyst who contacted me and said, we got a problem. As onerous as that bill may be, as we may think it is, we were also in the front lines of trying to address some of the more concerning issues that were part of that discussion in the first place. So this certainly wasn't intended to suggest we shouldn't, but just as a point of information.
Yeah, it should be good for the public to know why we're members of several organizations, not just because we all want to sit on a board and go to more meetings.
Right.
So I just want to make sure we see value as a city being part of those organizations.
Right. Next slide. So we wanted to also give you at least a snapshot of CIP projects that are funded in our 2021-2022 budget. Again, we maintained our commitment for these strategic investments. Obviously, debt service is part of the equation. The projects that you heard discussed tonight require are financed through debt service payments. Our commitment to transportation, street maintenance, as we mentioned, the assistance to park and golf in the way of capital projects, water and wastewater out of those enterprise funds. So you can see almost $62 million in 2021 and a little over $66 million in 2022 is provided. Projects that you will see that we will work on over the next 2 years, in addition to the bond projects: traffic signal replacement, improvements at West 58th and Ward intersection, Gold Strike Park, playground equipment replacement, our whole approach to taking lasting care. Those are all part of the schedule for the next 2 years.
Is a lot of the water expenditure for Gross Reservoir?
Yes, we have payments, I believe, to actually more along the lines of yes, partly Gross Reservoir and also the water system replacement for the North Trunk sewer line as well.
Right.
Next slide. So one of the things that we are proud of and think it reflects well on our collaborative relationship with our community is the Citizens Capital Improvement Project Committee projects that were recommended to all of you. We have what is on the slide is the projects that we've been working on through that were recommended by that committee. We've made progress on all of them. We've completed one of them, and then we are close to completing a couple of others that are on this list. And of course, the bond projects are the two biggest. Again, we had a great committee that worked on projects. They gave us very good recommendations, and we're in the process of completing all of those.
Mr. Pfeiffer?
Yeah, quick question. Are those, is there an error on that?
Who?
An error? I see Gold Strike Park, utilities underground, and missing sidewalk twice. So are those numbers,
Yes. There's an error.
so is the 113 in there as well at the bottom, the 2.5, the 1.6?
I think those numbers are okay, but ultimately there's a duplicate on that slide. So we apologize for that.
I don't think those numbers are right.
We'll commit to getting you a proper slide.
So those totals are incorrect as well.
I think so.
So we'll update this and get you a response in the weekly memo.
Good catch, Mr. Pfeiffer.
Yeah, it's amazing. We have our best people reviewing these things, and unfortunately, sometimes one gets past us.
Just wanted to make sure I understood what those totals were.
Okay, we'll update that slide and get it to you by Friday. Next slide. These are the unfunded CIP projects that we just want to keep top of mind. We've identified about $750 million worth of unfunded projects, and you can see the list there. You'll be hearing more in the future, very near future, regarding the unfunded projects that we're talking about in the under ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, as we present to you our transition plan. And then we have a number of other projects, for example, the sidewalk apps that we've identified, traffic signals and so forth, that we are continuing to search for grant funds and other sources of income in order to address those particular projects. Next slide. This is our summary of the CARES Act funds, and as you can see, we've developed a plan to expend the entire amount of $9.45 million, and you can see the focus of our attention, the grants to small business. We've also allocated altogether about $1.3 million of grants for individuals through rent mortgage payment, utility assistance, things along those lines. So we've tried to be very intentional about and fair in terms of what we've allocated to our community. And if you, when you kind of look at this from the standpoint of what's been allocated to externally and what's been allocated internally, it's about 80% external and 20% internal. So we did reserve a certain amount of funds for ourselves for the purchase of personal protective equipment and other kinds of equipment and technology, and also some about $500,000 of internal costs for our Family Medical Leave Act and other sorts of expenses along those lines. Okay, next slide. So future challenges. There's uncertainties, of course, associated with the future impacts of COVID-19, what it means to the economy. You know, I would have to say right now, I think we're reasonably optimistic. The economy seems to have weathered the storm so far. In the last weekly memo I sent all of you, we were able to provide you with an update on our unemployment numbers. You know, we were 12% in April. The last unemployment numbers that we looked at for August, we were at 6.6% in Arvada, and most of the region was in that same situation. I also received some information from the county manager regarding collections in Jefferson County, and most importantly, the open space sales tax, which is shared by all the municipalities in Jefferson County, is up by over 7%, or about $2 million, which is good news. And of course, you know, every month we look closely at our sales tax collection, and so far, knock on wood, it's been holding pretty good for us. I think we're somewhere around 4% year over year right now. We'll see whether that continues through the end of the year. The end of last year for us in 2019, our sales tax was kind of slow in the first 6 months, and it rebounded in the last 6 months of the year. So as we do the year-over-year comparisons of 2020 to 2019, we may see a little bit of slippage there because we had such a good year at the second half of 2019, but we'll see. Certainly working with the bid and getting businesses open in Old Town helps. And we've been able to see some recovery of the restaurant industry over the last few months. So that's all good news. We'll see how it holds out for the rest of the year. We don't want to be overly optimistic and count our chickens before they hatch. We want to be appropriately conservative, which I believe the budget that we propose to you does reflect that. The other future challenges, we've talked about the unfunded capital projects. We are also going to be presenting to you some additional information around our utility master plans and some of the costs and issues associated with that. Again, John asked a great question. Are we confident in our projections? Did we look at those? The answer is yes. And again, in the case of our utilities, we've got new people that are looking at those assets and looking at the projected useful life of those assets, and we're taking another look to make sure that we're taking care of those assets as we should, as they're very important to our infrastructure. And then I always like to remind everyone about the annual street maintenance deficit of $8 to $10 million a year. I remain diligent, we all do, in terms of how we are going to take care of that and hopefully fund that deficit with some sort of revenue stream in the future. And then, of course, the Jefferson Parkway, and we have not calculated and therefore have not included any resources to implement the Enhanced Law Enforcement Integrity Act. And the big ticket item there is, of course, the body-worn cameras. The reason why we haven't assumed anything is because we don't have the information to make the assumptions, and so until we do, we'll work that in later. Next slide. So we wanted to end with a great picture of our team taken at an event last fall when we could all get together and celebrate as a team. And it also is meant to signify that we are a resilient group, we are a resourceful group, and we appreciate the great working relationship we have with the City Council. And it's through that collaboration that we were able to propose a budget that, frankly, I think is something that a lot of cities would like to propose if they could. We've been able to do it because our economy has stayed resilient, our team has stayed resilient, and we've been able to collaborate to put something together that not only maintains services and keeps all of our team together, but also in a couple of strategic areas like our police officer ads, partially funded through a grant, our ads in organization service effectiveness. We're able to continue to pursue some of the initiatives that the City Council wishes us to pursue. So with that, I'll stop and see if there's any other questions.
Mr. Pfeiffer.
So I appreciate the fact that you bring up the ADA infrastructure quite a bit. And when we talk about inclusive communities, and that's been a hot topic, I feel we bring it up here, but I never see a line item, and I never see, and maybe because I didn't ask, and I'm asking this time, to see how much of our money do we put towards the ADA accessibility through our city, because $80 million worth of needs, and yet I don't see any line items calling out us addressing the deficit of all these. These are mostly, I'm assuming, corners, right?
So capital projects and other facility-type improvements are embedded.
Inside there, okay.
Those kinds of improvements are embedded within projects. We can certainly provide some information to the council if you'd like us to.
Or could we get one of those dashboards on how much progress we're making on this subject?
I think we can provide you with some information along those lines, yes.
Because I want to make sure we stay focused on the ADA infrastructure, and I
Right.
think that's very important, especially now when more and more people are at home.
Right.
And, you know, everything from, I mean, yes, our disabled citizens obviously benefit from having accessibility, but I mean, it's also helps our community move around
Correct.
a lot more. So
Right.
I'd like us to stay focused when we talk about an inclusive community on our ADA obligations.
Right. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Devon, I don't see any other lights for questions,
Okay.
so let's move on to the next one.
Move on to the next one. I believe Lori Gillis is going to lead us off on a presentation regarding organization and service effectiveness.
Just as a reminder for council, we'll be bringing you work system presentations tonight. We have organizational and service effectiveness and safe community. And then on October 12th, there will be a presentation with the remaining work systems.
Thank you.
So we will keep this moving along, but we have a ways to go in the budget presentation. So thank you, Mayor and council members. City Manager Mark Devon has done a great job in setting the stage as we move forward into our work system budget presentations. Again, we have 5 work systems: organizational and service effectiveness, safe community, vibrant community and neighborhoods, community and economic development, and infrastructure. All of these directly align to City Council, your strategic results. We were intentional in starting with organizational and service effectiveness, as this work system is so tightly tied to all other work systems and to the city's commitment to effectiveness. I want to start by saying that we believe our success in navigating the current challenges has been due to the city's organizational and service effectiveness built on systems, processes, transparency, solid planning, and an excellent city team. Work system presentations tonight and on October 12th will follow the same general format. Each work system will include a summary of revenue and expenditures, a few examples of work system strategic results and performance measures, proposed budgetary additions and reductions by work system, future challenges and opportunity, and of course, we always have time for questions. Next slide, please. Organizational and service effectiveness is made up of the following departments: the City Manager's Office, City Attorney's Office, Finance, Human Resources, and Information Technology. I have a few of our leaders here tonight that will be jumping in on this presentation. Key services within each department or business operations are listed within each department. Next slide, please. The proposed budget document, which is a great source of information. It was fun for me to listen to your questions tonight because the information that you ask is all included in the document. We're happy to guide you there, but it is a document rich in information. The proposed budget document includes citywide summary information beginning on page 46, and that is what City Manager Devon covered earlier tonight. The organizational and service effectiveness work system starts on page 125. The revenues listed support organization-wide activities. I'll be speaking to increases and decreases on a few of the larger revenue items. The first row listed taxes include sales tax, general use, auto use, building use, and property tax. The 2020 decline in taxes is primarily the result of declines in general use and auto use tax. The increase in taxes as we move into 2021 and 2022 is related to increases in sales tax. Highway users tax makes up the majority of intergovernmental revenues. The decline in intergovernmental revenues is primarily due to the decreases in highway users tax moving into 2021 and 2022. Charges for services includes internal transfers or chargebacks from water, wastewater, stormwater, and solid waste to cover the administrative services for these enterprise funds. And the majority of miscellaneous is interest earnings. Any questions on revenues?
Don't see any questions.
Okay, we'll move on. Next slide to expenditures, which is found on page 126 of the proposed budget. At the top of the summary page, personnel, which consists of salary and benefits. The 2020 to 2021 decrease reflects a transfer of 2 positions to vibrant communities and neighborhoods Work System, or VCN. The two positions that you'll hear about on October 12th include the newly appointed Deputy Director and the Neighborhood Engagement Coordinator. The decrease in expenditures here is also attributable to retirements. The 2022 increase reflects the proposed new increases, the full effect of those increases coming to OSE. The decrease in contract and leases line from 2019 to 2020 and through 2022 is a result of a transfer to JPPHA, that was done in 2019 and not continued in the out years. The transfers includes transfers from the general funds to other funds, including parks, streets, golf, capital, and debt service funds. The other decrease in expenditures, as City Manager Devon spoke to, is the incorporation of the 3% reduction, which I'll speak to in a few slides. And now we're going to turn to a couple of our team members to talk about strategic results, and they'll share some performance measures. Strategic results and performance measures really demonstrate that we are accomplishing the direction that you have provided to city staff. And at this time, I'll hand off to Ben Irwin, our Chief Communications Manager, to speak to the Communications and Engagement Strategic Result.
Thank you, Lori. Mayor, members of the council, good evening. Bruce, slide, please. So just to reiterate a bit what Lori said, you'll find organizational and service effectiveness strategic results beginning on page 127 of the budget document. And this is important to us and to the budget because it doesn't even exist in a vacuum. We are working and applying these resources to further the objectives of City Council and our community. And so this is what we seek, myself and several other colleagues seek to underscore tonight to sort of demonstrate that connection. So the second strategic result within the organizational service effectiveness work system has to do with the city's commitment to establishing a strategic communications and engagement strategy. And I just want to preview this by saying that we'll have an opportunity to talk about this in much more detail next month at the October 26th workshop. But you can see that our strategic results have a goal in mind and then a series of milestones to achieve that goal. The council receives periodic updates on these strategic results, and we clearly update them annually to be able to keep them aligned with the community's priorities and your priorities. With that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Gabriella Bomer.
That is correct.
Okay,
Gabriella,
yeah.
I was going to jump in. Next
I'm
up
sorry, yeah,
is
no.
Gabriella Bomer,
Yeah.
the city's acting director of human resources, to share a few HR performance measures.
Thank you, Lori and Ben. Good evening, council members.
Good evening.
Let me get my glasses on. So the next two slides we're going to show you illustrate measures we use to advance our organizational performance excellence framework. This table demonstrates measures we track in human resources to ensure we are meeting our work system principle of fostering a top workplace environment, as well as our goal of attracting and retaining a high-performing workforce. As City Manager Devon said earlier, green is good. If a field is green, it means we're meeting our measure and our target. If it is yellow, we are within reach. And if you see a red field, that would signify that we are not in reach of our goal, and it would prompt us to take a look at what we're doing and consider changes to get closer to our target. Our first measure is about competitive compensation. To achieve this goal, we match jobs to the market and grade them according to their market value. We are meeting that goal each year. The next three measures are about health and well-being of our employees. We track the affordability of our health care by benchmarking ourselves with other similar organizations and keeping our premium increases low. We track how many employees are getting an annual physical and how many of them are participating in our wellness educational awareness programs. As you can see, we're doing pretty good in those areas as well. Recruiting and performance feedback are also important components of our top workplace culture. Our recruiting targets aim to measure how well and how quickly we help departments fill their important vacancies with great hires. And our last measure is about ensuring that all employees receive a performance evaluation each year. We have made significant improvement with performance feedback since implementing our TrackStar system, and we are very close to meeting our lofty target of 100%. Are there any questions for me on these particular
You bet.
measures?
Ms. Ford's got a question for you. One or more questions?
On the recruitment resulting in a hire during the first recruitment process, I noticed that it went down quite a bit. Is this due to finding it harder to recruit people, or what?
It is there are a couple of difficult employment markets, some very competitive jobs, especially in engineering and fields and construction, that sometimes require us to go out for a second look. So our focus is on finding the right person. So if we don't want to force that fit in the first recruitment, if we don't have to, we'll go back out.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Go ahead.
If there are no more questions, I think I am turning it over to Brian, Archer.
Do you want me to do mine?
Yeah,
Next
please.
up is Brian Archer, the city's finance director and head coach of the budget process, to share a few finance performance managers. I really do want to say that the purpose here is we are data-driven, and we wanted to make sure you saw these examples and could see the expertise that we have on the team using this information.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Excited to share some financial measures. Gabriella did not tell me that she was going to point out that she had no red, and I have lots of red on my measures, but there's a story with each one of those. So excited to start at the top, very broad look. This measure ties directly to the City Council budget and fiscal policy that requires us to provide you a balanced 10-year financial plan. We've been able to do that the last 4 years. The next few measures represent our work with the GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, as we submit our budget document and our CAFR to them each year. And below this, we have measures that require us to implement their recommendations within a 1-year time period. Next, you will see some work done in our revenue group with our business community and the people that collect and remit our sales tax. And you can see that we've done a decent job with compliance. We're in the window between 85 and 95%. So we're excited and trying to push above 95% on compliance. Next, you will see electronic filing. And we came to City Council a couple years ago and asked to make that mandatory. That was because we were unsuccessful trying to make that voluntary. City Council was acceptable of our proposal, and you can see that number has skyrocketed since, with very little pushback from the business community. It has reduced our time and our cost in transmitting and processing those returns. Finally, we have a measure related to our audits and our time frame, and you can see we fell back a little bit in 17 and 18 and then made a commitment again over the last couple of years. I'm excited 2020 is not up here, but actually this number has gone up during COVID. So moving to digital has helped our auditors and our business community comply with this measure. And then finally, very, very detailed measure which goes around the grant proposals and how successful we are. And so the reason we use this measure is if we're low, then that means we need to write more grants. We need to write less grants. If we're high, that means we need to write more grants. And I know that seems backwards, but ultimately, if our success rate continues to go up, we want to get out on the street more often. So just a tiny little picture of some of the measures that we track in finance. Back to Ms. Gillis.
Thank you. As we mentioned earlier, the proposed budget does have some recommended staffing increases as we move into 2021. City Attorney Rachel Morris and I will be presenting the proposed staffing increases. Beginning with the City Manager's Office, we are proposing 2 additional positions. These recommendations are based on a few key OSC principles, including the City Council Strategic Plan. The third OSC principle, found on page 26, states, the City of Arvada maintains appropriate staffing levels, collaborative communications, IT and financial management support, as well as leadership services to all work systems to achieve operational and strategic results. We are proposing the addition of 1 FTE to serve as an assistant to the City Manager. With the elimination of the second Deputy City Manager and the transfer of 2 positions to Vibrant Communities and Neighborhoods, the CMO team is not operating at an appropriate staffing level. Although the City Manager and the Deputy City Manager have abilities to dive deeper into projects, this work can take us away from leadership and collaboration responsibilities. This year has brought increased need for leadership in the areas such as waste hauling, Ask Arvada, and customer service, Arvada Center transition, bond projects, diversity, equity, and inclusion, IT security, master planning, to name a few. The city manager's office needs additional personnel to manage large-scale projects and ad hoc requests. Additionally, we are proposing the addition of 1 FTE to serve as an engagement coordinator. The 6th OSC principle speaks to communications and engagement services, providing multiple information platforms and data to the community to support its ability to engage in community governance, exercise civic responsibility, and easily access and share information. As you've experienced long before the challenges related to the pandemic, the city has been enhancing our strategies and venues for communication. Under the leadership of Ben Irwin, we have been upping our game. We've taken on the communication needs of the pandemic, DEI, solid waste, bond projects, to name a few. This position will be dedicated to support community engagement, which is key to meeting council and community needs. This position will lead citywide support to public involvement and for internal and external projects. The position will be supporting meaningful engagement and more consistent use of the city's online engagement platform. Both of the city manager office requests are aligned with all of the OSC principles in some manner. Do you have any questions regarding these position ads?
Mr. Marriott, you're first.
Yes, I have a question. So the question I have is on the engagement coordinator position. So it strikes me a couple of things. One is that it costs within spitting distance of an assistant city attorney, which at first blush seems like a lot to me. And I guess I'd want to know, how did we arrive on what that position is, what that position does, and then what that position costs us?
All position requests were classified and reviewed by the Human Resources Department to take a look at the job description, what's included in the background and requirements, and that is how they were classified to the market. Ben or Gabriella, do you have anything to add? Okay.
Well, that's salary and benefits, right?
Correct.
It's not just salary.
Right.
Correct.
But the assistant city attorney would be salary and benefits too,
Right.
I would assume. Okay. I think that's it. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Jones?
Well, that was one of my questions. The second question, I just lost it because John took my first question. But I did have another question. Does anybody else have a question?
Ms. Simpson thought she had a question, but then
You actually got to mine with the wrap-up of the benefits. But I will note, John, that the PR people can make a little bit more than you would expect sometimes working in that industry.
I lost it.
Okay. You can come back to it later if you need to.
With that, I'll hand off to City Attorney Rachel Morris to speak to the other two positions.
Thank you, Ms. Gillis. As the city has grown over the past several years, so too has the demand for legal services within the city. This is most visible right now in litigation and legal advising on special projects. As Mr. Devon mentioned earlier tonight, the bond projects have required a significant amount of legal services, and then other special projects like our new waste management program have also required additional legal services. Due to this increasing need for legal services, there's also been a corresponding increase in the need for temporary employees and the retention of outside counsel. It has reached a point now where it will be more cost-effective to hire new employees than to continue to provide necessary legal services through temporary employees and outside counsel. Ensuring that the city attorney's office is adequately staffed helps the city in avoiding unnecessary legal risk. Both these new positions, the assistant city attorney and the legal specialist, which is a 3-year position, will allow the city attorney's office to continue to meet the challenge of providing necessary legal services as the need for those services increases. Any questions for me?
Ms. Jones?
I found my question. And it was with regard to the internal versus external search. Are these positions going to be opened up internally first, or what's the philosophy of the city on that?
Well, actually, we've gone both directions on searching for candidates. I believe, to my knowledge, these will all be open externally. So the internal candidates can apply, but we want to see what's out in the market as well.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Ford?
Over the past year or two, we've seen a number of litigation, and I was wondering if we're looking at our policies to prevent that in the future, to see if there's something that we could change, or, I don't know, just to kind of reduce that.
Absolutely. And when we see litigation numbers increase, one of the things that I always look at is the increase in a specific area? In other words, is it a specific type of work where our legal risks are increasing? And really what I'm seeing now is that we have a corresponding increase in litigation in all kinds of different areas. I have looked at our various policies and our practices in a number of areas, and although there are always ways that we can improve, and we are definitely working to do that, I think it's more a function of the city's growth as a whole. So as our population increases, as we have more people traveling into and out of our city, as we increase the number of employees that we have for the city, we are naturally going to have more litigation that arises out of those services because we're doing more. And so right now, that's how I view it. The other thing to think about, especially with this year, is that litigation naturally goes up along with a recession. So when people are going through a recession, they are more likely to file suit on claims that they might not have in more prosperous times. So that's another factor to think about.
If I could add one more thing about our city attorney. She is very data-driven. She tracks more information. You can look at what the team is working on, how much each team member is managing. It's pretty impressive.
Mr. Marriott?
Thank you, Your Honor. I think since we're just about done with this, I just wanted to make a comment to wrap this up to the city team. Again, I get struck by this engagement coordinator position. I'm not disputing whether we need that or not, but I would just encourage you guys to be very careful and very thoughtful of exactly what this person's going to do and the value that this person has, and in selecting both the position and then the person for the position. I would also say, look carefully at how that position may interact with the assistant to the city manager position as well, because to me it looks like maybe there's some potential overlap there, and you don't need a management team level of person for both of those, maybe for one and not the other or something. So anyway, I think it strikes me the kind of the cost for that, for something that we don't currently have, and again, I'm not disputing it. I just would ask you to just relook at it, just make sure we're going down the right path here, and that we're not, that we're not jumping too far ahead on something like this. That maybe that's a position that grows over time into this as its effect grows, rather than starting here. That maybe we start anyway. I don't want to tell you how to do the management, but if I'm struck by this, I'm certain other people are too. And I would just encourage us to just be real careful treading here, making sure we're really doing the right thing and doing it at the right level.
Thank you for that, Councilmember Marriott. One other point I'll add, which is in direct response to your ask, is we are reworking the city manager's office workforce plan. Part of that work will do exactly what you're suggesting, which it's an analysis of skill sets, competency, and capacity, and then aligned with workload needs. So these positions, as they've been written and crafted at this point in time, will go through a rigorous process as we do that workforce plan. So I appreciate what you're saying. Okay, good there?
Yep.
Okay, so there is another group of proposed additions in the budget. They are all in the area of information technology. Our Chief Information Officer, Craig Poley, is here tonight to speak to these other proposed additions. Next slide, please.
Good evening, Council,
Good evening.
Mr. Mayor. First time meeting most of you. Pleasure to be aboard. So the first item that we were talking about is what we call enterprise storage. So we have storage capability right now for things that are fast, and this is storage for things that are big. We've been solutioning those as sort of a one-off in the past, And so what I'm proposing instead is to look at this from a holistic perspective and try to solution something for the city. That also would include potentially body-worn camera footage if we decide to, excuse me, store that on-prem. The next item is Zoom licenses. We're expecting virtual meetings, hybrid meetings to continue. We have a few meeting rooms we still need to outfit. So this is a grant of money for the Zoom licenses for next year. Active Directory. Active Directory is basically how we manage every account in the city. We don't have a tool to manage that system right now. So this is to have a tool for Active Directory. And the last piece is documentation. It's called OSP. It's documentation of the fiber that's in the ground. So it was paid out of CIP last year, or this year rather. And so we need to make it operational next year.
Okay, very good.
Anybody have any questions?
I do have a question.
Ms.
On your
Pfeiffer.
IT storage, what do you mean by centralized platform? Are you putting this in the cloud, or are you putting something on-prem, or?
Right now, this is on-prem. I think that we would like to solution something like that in the cloud long-term, but frankly, I don't think we're in a position right now to say AWS or Azure or Google. So
And
this
this will
is for an
support the
appliance.
cameras? You kind of briefly mentioned the cameras. I'm assuming the body-worn cameras you're referring to.
Body-worn, buildings, KATV, all of those types of storage. It was actually catalyzed by a KATV project that was ongoing. And when I looked at the cost to solution just one, I thought instead what we should do is solution this as a whole. So for example, the 90,000 provides 500 terabytes of storage, which is considerably more than we have right now. But the same appliance is scalable up to 3.1 petabytes. Body-worns are probably going to generate between 4 and 5 terabytes per day. So if we retain that for 1 year, that's 1.5 petabytes, which is a number that we've never dealt with here before.
How long do we have to hold that video covered? Do you
That's
know?
still to be decided.
We don't know how long?
The state bill says 45 days, so we have to hold it at least that long, but it could be longer as well.
And all we need is 90,000 to have enough storage?
90,000 gets us enough storage if we have a short data retention on that data. If we want to retain that for a year, then no, we're going to have to spend more.
Okay. And that's just storage? Because what I'm worried about is, the price points we got around the cameras, and this is really cheap. So I want to make sure that what we're talking about here, you're going to come back and maybe ask for more money because there's software, there's other things that are going to go along with these cameras, not just storage.
Right. This is just the storage piece, and this is for mechanical disk. This is not for flash disk, stuff like that. So you have redundancy inside of the appliance. If you lose a disk, you lose nothing. And so we would have lots of data protection, but it doesn't guarantee that we're going to have everything that we need if we do decide to have a long data retention on especially video.
Well, I just want to make sure council knows you're going to come back for more money over the next few years. This is not.
It's certainly possible. Body-worn is going to be expensive, whether we solution it on-prem with a piece like this or whether we go into the cloud. If we go into the cloud, we're going to have connectivity and network problems because 4 to 5 terabytes a day is an awful lot.
Okay, thank you.
Were those all the questions for Craig before I jump in?
Yes.
Okay, and I'll just jump in here. We have not resourced or priced the total cost related to body-worn cameras. We have a long way to go on that. You'll hear a little bit more tonight from Kelly and Link. So we will be back.
Okay, next.
Okay. Next slide. Real quick, I would like to talk about the proposed reductions as mentioned by the city manager in the city manager transmittal and in his discussion tonight. The city was better positioned and better prepared than many communities to face COVID and the resulting economic impacts. In addition to our long-range planning and appropriately conservative finance team, even before the pandemic, the city's leadership team conducted an exercise that at the time was called Recession Planning. As you will recall, this work was actually triggered by a council discussion. As a result of the recession planning work, the city had already begun processing challenges with revenue shortfalls and increasing costs. As we entered the budget process, we had a baseline from which to start planning for how we could deal with unknown but likely impacts of the pandemic. Although we always look deeper than across-the-board reductions, we ask all work systems to work through and present scenarios of what a 3%, 5%, and 10% reduction in funding could look like. The work, although not easy, pushed on our thinking and made us consider core services, what we could reduce, stop doing, what we must absolutely continue, what demands might decrease or increase in the near future. Needless to say, all work systems took the exercise seriously and brought forward solid thinking. Ultimately, the target savings needed to balance the budget, including the proposed increases in the long-range plan, was about 3%. Which you heard about the increases. The reductions you see on the slide are primarily in the areas of training, professional services, and supplies. The proposed budget does include some other tough decisions around reductions in celebratory events and recognitions, and we made the decision to extend the life of our desk phones. The line items in these reductions, there are several spreadsheets that account for what is being reduced with the 3%, but the city team believes this is all manageable. Any questions on the reductions?
Not seen any.
We're getting close. So COVID challenges and achievements. As council and the community experience, the city has worked diligently to adjust to the challenges that came with COVID. As Councilmember Miller has stated, we don't want to use COVID as an excuse. As a result, the entire city team has taken on many challenges and just made things happen. This list of challenges and ultimately achievements is a reflection of our values. We wanted to keep services available and not have the community experience service impacts. From the get-go, we worked to set up our team remotely. When the team could not come into the office because of the stay-at-home order, we were keeping things moving. We modified service delivery based on the voice of our customers. We are still one of the only agencies conducting hybrid council meetings. Council felt it was important for citizens to be able to come to City Hall, and Zoom is a way to be present without wearing a mask. We've been deliberate in our communications and ultimately connections with both employees and community. We fast-tracked the distribution of the resources through the CARES Act and are leading in our ability to support businesses and communities in our community. And another example is our efforts to tap the talents of existing employees. We repurposed people throughout this process to ensure we were able to get the needed work done. Questions here?
Do not see any questions.
One more, next slide. So we do have a lot on our radar. You'll see a lot of overlap from what was presented by City Manager Mark Devon. We have big work ahead. To continue our commitment to delivering superior services to enhance the lives of everyone in our community, we must take on these opportunities. This list highlights a path full of some significant work ahead. Although nothing listed should come as a surprise to you, you can plan to hear more about all items listed in the months ahead. We have big hills to climb, and honestly, the list would be intimidating if we did not have such a talented, committed team. We're navigating changing times. Several items on this list have originated from legislative and societal drivers. And with that, final slide, we are here available for questions, and if you're ready, we can move on to Safe Community.
Any questions from council, and does anybody need a break or a stand in place or keep plugging? You'd like a break real quick? Yeah, we'll take a short break. Okay, we'll reconvene. Mr. Devon?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we're going to have financial business analyst Kelly Newman present the Safe Community presentation, which will include the police department budget and a few mentions of the municipal court.
Very good. Good evening.
Thank you so much for having us tonight. So, as Mark was so nice to introduce me and tell you, I'll be going through the Safe Community budget proposals, and these are on pages 132 through 139 in your budget book. Next slide, please. We'll be covering our 3 program area lines of businesses, including field services, operations, and our judicial branch. Next slide, please. And the first one is our revenue. It's on page 133. These are the revenues projected for our tax increment funds, our 2 TI funds, Fund 21 and 22. And the revenues have been adjusted to meet our current COVID economic forecast and continue those conservative revenue projections. Next slide, please. Our Safe Community work system expenditures have also been adjusted. We have, in most cases, accepted the 3% budget decreases, and the change in position counts that you'll notice from 2020 to 2021, the 246 to 249 include the 4 additional entry-level police officers that are partially grant funded that we're requesting, and a decrease in one position from courts, which is a court clerk. So any questions on that?
Don't see any questions on that.
All right, next slide, please. One of our top strategic results for public safety is by December of 2021, we'll obtain the safest city designation according to the National Incident-Based Reporting System, or NIBRS. These include milestones of having a traffic accident rate lower than the national average, and also having 80% of our calls with priority of 0 or 1 with a less than 5-minute response time. Currently, because of the way NIBRS aggregates all of its data that it gets nationally, it lags quite a bit, and as of 2018, we are meeting these. 2019 numbers are currently being aggregated and will be available sometime soon, so we'll be able to update those in our performance measures in ClearPoint. Next slide, please. To further show that we as public safety, as well as courts and Safe Community, are data-driven, we really can glean so much information from the work we do. We really wanted to highlight some of our lab data and our crime scene investigation teams. We have one of the top performing crime scene investigation teams in the area, which is wonderful and really helps us assist some of our goals, as well as making sure that our cases result in case filings and that ultimately we are catching people that do bad things. So the first one is our lab and number of high impact crime scenes reported. You'll notice in those numbers that there's points, and it's because it's a monthly average of those cases. Next is the number of CODIS or APHIS hits. CODIS is the combined DNA index system, and it blends forensic science and computer technology into a tool for linking violent crimes. And then APHIS is an automated fingerprint identification system. It was originally used by the FBI for criminal cases. So what this statistic or this data is showing is that the more CODIS and APHIS hits we can get, the more we can really link those crimes and hopefully solve more crimes with those, as well as potential area crimes, or at least link, so that when we're catching one person, we're able to close multiple crimes and stop a habitual offender.
Great. Mr. Jones, do you have a question?
I'll do my best. I do have Commander Kellogg on Zoom. He's our current investigations commander, so if it's something specific, he may have to help us.
And this may be a little off topic, and so it's okay if there's not an answer. It may be a takeaway. But again, from a data-driven perspective, I think this is great. I'm just wondering from a mental health perspective. I know we've got don't we have two mental health co-responders that go out with our PD? How are we, and again, if you don't have the answers, that's fine tonight, but I'd love to get it. How are we tracking that data, and how does that data support future expenditures or future ads for the mental health co-responder program?
Sure, we actually do track that. That's not one of them that we have
Right.
added in here, but we have those numbers. So we measure several things. We're actually reviewing that. So we want to know how many calls they go out on. We want to know how many referrals they make. And we also are trying to track the impact it has on us. So we know how many hours we respond as a police department. So how much of our resources are spent on mental health calls. So the intent is that if we have our co-responders plugged in, working behind the scenes, we'll reduce that number. So we're tracking that too. I don't have those right here, but we do have all those numbers. Eric, do you have anything that you wanted to add to that piece of it? And you're on mute. We can certainly add that. If you guys would like that in the Friday memo, we can specifically add that one to the Friday memo because we do the co-responders. We do track
Yeah,
them separately.
I think it would be good to see, because I think in this day and age that we live in right now, I know that mental health crisis is on the rise for a lot of different reasons, and I think it would be good. And I apologize that it's not
No,
a
that's
part of
a
this,
great
but
question.
when
I
I
will
saw
tell you,
this,
one of the things we have struggled with this year is hiring those co-responders and having them on staff. That's
Right.
been a difficult thing for us.
it's probably not a coveted job.
It's a difficult, absolutely, a very difficult job, yeah.
And then the last question regarding that is, how do we, I'm assuming that there's got to be some coordination with the fire district on those calls, because they may go out not knowing that it's a mental health call and they don't need the ambulance. And so it'd be interesting just to understand how we are working in collaboration with them. If I'm assuming we are.
Yes.
So again, completely off topic for tonight, and I apologize, but I appreciated the data, and I thought we've got to have it as well. So.
No, and that's a great question. With the fire department, we're working with the fire department trying to find a solution. Because let's be honest, the police department is not perfectly set up to deal with mental health crisis. The fire department is not either. So both of those agencies spend a great deal of time and resources trying to do that. The fire department spends a lot of time actually transporting them after the police department has responded, identified maybe a mental health hold. We certainly don't want to take somebody who's in a mental health crisis, put them in the back of a police car and transport them.
Right.
Fire department usually puts them in an ambulance and transports them, gives them a little more dignity and respect, but still not an optimal solution.
Right.
So we're looking to take police resources, fire resources, and our co-responders and trying to come up with the best possible solution.
Okay, thank you very much for that, and I appreciate any updates we can get in the future on that as well.
Sure. Any questions on this slide?
No, this slide was easy. Thanks for keeping all the, bad guys out, or finding all the bad guys, I should say.
Sure. That's the other thing that this slide, as well as, like Link mentioned, some of our stats on our co-responder program, some of our traffic stats also help us do is really determine how we're going to allocate our current resources and make sure that, okay, hey, our crime going up, our number of crime scenes are going up, so therefore we're going to have to be able to put more investigators in there to help really identify those crime scenes and process them so that we're not getting too below our goals on that. Next slide, please. For 2021 to 2022, we have one proposed addition, and that is the 4 additional police officers. Salary benefits, this amount also includes their basic needs to get started, academy costs, gear, radios, ballistic vests, and things like that. These new positions are partially funded through a COPS grant, which is how we were able to add them to our budget for 2021 through 2024. They do, just to keep our 10-year plan balanced, unfortunately end in December 2024, but it is our goal, and I've been working closely with finance and watching our revenue projections, as well as really working hard on grant funding and additional savings that we can find so that we can come back to you in the next couple of years and say, hey, we found some additional savings and efficiencies, or have been able to grant fund other things to be able to build those 4 positions into our 10-year plan and keep them in perpetuity at that point. Next slide, please. Our proposed reductions for 2021 and 2022 represent those 3% budget reductions that were accepted. From courts, they are reducing their positions by 1 court clerk, and this is due to reduction in court cases and also expected efficiencies in the new journal technology program that they're implementing. They were also able to reduce their operations budget in general administration, temporary wages, contract services, and wages. One of the largest givebacks or reductions that PD was able to make is roughly $190,000 in overtime, and we've really found that we'll be able to give this back due to the amazing work of the recruitment teams, HR and finance, in helping us really meet the strategic goal of filling all of our PD positions. Our vacancy rate has drastically decreased this year, and that has really helped us end any mandatory overtime, and we'll be able to reduce our overtime budget as a whole this year and next year. We're also able to give back from professional services and general operations. As the other departments mentioned, there's virtually no out-of-state training right now. We're seeing a lot of training savings and efficiencies through Zoom meetings and virtual conferences. We've also decided to push out the replacement of our cell phones, some of our crime scene investigation equipment, and some other equipment to a 3 or 4 year replacement schedule instead of 2, which is going to save us over the next couple of years.
Why the reduction in Chemitox?
Chemitox actually closed.
Oh, did it?
Last year,
Ah.
it did. It is no longer in business, and we, through an IGA, have been using the state lab for
Okay.
processing all of our samples, and knock on wood, Colorado currently does not charge for that, so we had a pretty instant savings that we were able to realize those savings and put them into our reductions going forward.
Right. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions on our reductions? Okay. Next slide, please. COVID challenges and achievements. COVID has really hit public safety in different ways than other departments in the fact that it's been an uninterrupted delivery of service needed. Unfortunately, criminals don't take a break because there's a pandemic. It would be really nice, but they're not quite listening to that. And so that has created a lot of additional work for PD, or different work in some cases, including creation of an operations plan, dealing with and minimizing an increased risk of exposure to both civilian and sworn staff, obtaining and providing PPE, as well as making sure that all of our community stations have the PPE they need and that officers know where to get it, they're getting it timely. We've also found that we need a distribution and further decentralization of our resources. On a high note and an achievement, it's really helped us to fully utilize our community stations and making sure we're maintaining service at all of the community stations. We've been able to use these locations for meetings, linked in through Zoom and LifeSize, to make sure that we're still meeting, the state requirements of minimized groups, but still being able to connect all of our departments. And then additional workload of team members, again mentioning the PPE, the remote capabilities, quarantine challenges, how we're going to handle and how we did handle having any exposures, and making sure that we're covered for those and that our staff is taken care of. Also working very closely with finance. Again, they've done an amazing job with the CARES Act and figuring out what we can get reimbursed for that we could need now, being able to get that, and then a few very specific law enforcement COVID grants that we were able to get and bring in additional funding for additional PPE through those manners. Next slide, please. And then future challenges and opportunities. The big one coming up is the Enhanced Law Enforcement Integrity Act, or Senate Bill 217. This includes both the body-worn camera unfunded mandate as well as increased reporting requirements. This is going to be a big push on all of our staff, and as staff has mentioned, we're currently looking at exactly what all of those requirements and needs are going to be. We are looking, and I'm working with finance to see what potential grant opportunities are out there. I will caution that because this is an unfunded mandate in the state, the competition for those grants is going to go through the roof. So we'll do the best we can, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. It's coming. We're also preparing for future personnel growth within PD and how we can structure our leadership ranks to make sure that we're set up for the future and have everything we can currently do to be prepared for that personnel growth. We are also reaching a critical evidence storage need, and to the point that we are going to need a new facility sooner rather than later. Again, we're continuing to build out our community stations. You know, the impact those community stations have on the public is great, and we're able to see so many people and get so much use out of those stations, but we're still building them. We're still new to community policing. Those buildings are still very new, and so we're still making sure that we're getting all the staff we need out there to really run everything we need through those community stations. Our increased and replacement vehicle needs, as we grow our staff, so do our vehicle and replacement vehicle needs, and then increased service delivery demands and reallocation of our resources to meet those current service needs. Again, with SB 217, one piece that it came with, as well as the body-worn cameras, are those increased reporting requirements. And we do think, or do anticipate, that we're going to get more records requests through that bill and through the video footage once we have it. And so making sure that our records department is built up and has the support and the civilian staff they need to be able to answer those, and make sure that we are complying with our new state mandated reporting requirements timely. Next slide, please. And finally, in closing, you know, the Arvada team is very, very strong, and everyone here works so hard to make sure that we're providing everything we can to the public, even with those financial constraints, and that will continue. Any questions?
I don't see any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good presentation. Okay, Mr. Devon.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of council, first thing I'd like to do is thank everyone for their presentations and their comments. Thank you for your questions, as always, very good questions. And that leads us to the last item of the evening, and that's regarding service delivery in today's work environment, and we will have Ms. Linda Haley present that information for you.
Thank you, Mark.
Ms. Haley, good to see you.
Good evening to the council. It's really nice to see you all. It's been a while.
Yes.
I promise I will do as efficient a job as possible, since I know I'm the last one before we all get to go home. But I wanted to take some time this evening to talk to you all about service delivery and working in today's environment. If we could go to the next slide. So why are we looking into this? As you look at the bullets that I put up there, I want to give you kind of a narrative as to where we are today and why. As we've discussed with you via Friday memo and also in the cover sheet that you got for this presentation, our leadership team has been working very diligently throughout this pandemic to really look at the opportunities that this pandemic is presenting to us. We all are aware of the fact that fundamentally the way we're working and even living has changed and will be changed likely forever. And so what are the things that we can be doing and the services that we can be providing and how we're providing those services to continue to navigate this pandemic effectively, as well as come out on the other side stronger and be a lot more resilient and sustain high levels of service, as well as support for the employees that are providing those services. Again, in all very new territory, new methods, new delivery service methods. So that's why we're here tonight. We have started some initial research into what it looks like working in today's day and age and what it could look like for the future. We wanted to share with you some very high-level research results that we have found. And with your support, we'd like to continue doing that research. So we wanted to give you kind of the status update and the check-in as of where we are now, see about your feedback, and then look for your support moving forward. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Some headlines that we have found as we've been doing some research. For example, things that we want to highlight tonight and talk about in a little bit more in depth. 4-day work week, for example. That's been a trend that we've seen not only here in the metro area, but around the country. And so we'll talk to you a little bit more about some of the research we've done with some of our surrounding communities in that area. The other headline is Ready or Not, digital platforms are here to stay. It has been increasingly important, especially for government entities, to get on board with digital service delivery, and this pandemic has pushed that need and that honest requirement from our citizens and community to the forefront. And so we're looking at ways
in order to meet that and what works best for Arvada. So doing some more research on that. If you could go to the next slide, please. Additional trends that we're seeing, these are headlines that we have found from reporting agencies from across the globe, frankly. There is a push, and we see it here in the government sector, that can we prioritize and put in policy some things that can enhance digital service delivery. People that already provide digital service methods and web tools for government entities are seeing explosive growth in these last several months as a result of the pandemic. And so with that, if we could go to the next slide. We did find a national survey that was conducted in partnership with the Center for Digital Government, Xerox, and eRepublic. This was centered on government service delivery only. A national survey was conducted for citizens, customers that use government services across the country. And interestingly enough, they did the survey right before the pandemic hit the United States, and then they decided to do it again in June. And so we've got some detailed results. I'm going to share with you some high-level takeaways tonight and just a couple of examples of what they've pointed to that we feel is important to pay attention to and look into further in the months to come as we figure out what works good for Arvada. The 5 big takeaways that we saw from this survey involve the fact that digital services are in fact preferred. Multi-channel communications are critical going forward. We need to re-engineer our government processes to match the realities of this new normal that we're in. Citizens not only approve of, but are now expecting innovation from government. And as we've seen tonight, it's been a theme. Cyber and data security are even more critical now than ever. If we go to the next slide, we'll see that what we all have viewed as convenience before in the form of online services is quite frankly become the necessity. This is that same survey from the national survey conducted, pre-COVID and current. As you see with the light blue bars, that was done in January of this year. And multiple requests, how do you prefer to access government services? As you can see, around 60% were online, 50 some odd percent in person, another 27 to 30% via phone. Current day survey conducted, you can see the big shift. The preference is obviously online. Now you know that that's obviously out of necessity as well. Because we were in lockdown mode, we still needed to provide those services. Our customers still needed our services, so we scrambled to find ways to get those digital services to them. But what has also been interesting in the results of the survey is people have found out the convenience of online services where they knew they could take advantage of it before, but maybe they just felt traditionally it was easier for them to be in person or by phone. Now that they've experienced online or digital service delivery, they see how effective it is, how convenient it is, and how now it's necessary, they prefer it. So that's just a small indication of that survey. Yes, Mr. Pfeiffer.
So, thank you, Linda. On this one, I'm a little confused on it. So your light blue, is this supposed to add up to 100, all the bars?
No,
okay,
you could
so
choose
can you,
all of them.
Okay, so because I mean, if you do the light blue, it's obviously way over 100%.
Yes.
Versus
yes.
the dark blue isn't, so.
Yeah, it was a multiple choice question.
It was, so I think it's like multiple.
Yes.
Okay, I got it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So next slide, please. Based on that input and feedback, the survey dug deeper as to those who prefer digital online service delivery. What do you expect from those digital services? And it was a very clear indication. The pie is full, almost a third, a third, a third. They want improved reliability in those digital services being provided. They need to make sure that it's easy for them to use, and they want more. So all indications of these service delivery trends that we really need to dig deeper into for Arvada and pay attention in the months to come. Next slide. So now shifting gears a little bit to workforce trends and what we found nationally as well. Again, high-level results that we're providing to you. This is a survey that was given through SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resources Management. It's their 2020 benefits survey at the beginning of this year. As you can see, the numbers indicate a need for us to look into further possibly how are our work weeks scheduled for our employees? What kind of flexible working options could be provided? 32% of U.S. employers currently offer a 4-day work week of 40 hours for all or part of the year, while their business remains open for a normal work week. So a typical 5-day work week, however, they're allowing for flexible schedules for their employees to maybe work those 40 hours in 4 days. 23% of the organizations surveyed have implemented a true 4-day business week where all or partial operations are closed for 72 hours. 60% of those organizations expressed gains in employee satisfaction and productivity resulting from fewer meetings, which I think we can all agree on. And then also important to note, though, as you look at some workers involved in those changes, 39% of workers did note a distaste for a 4-day work week due to limited productivity, distractions from their work due to a longer work day, and other areas of concern. So things that we're paying attention to and interested in looking into further.
Great. Ms. Ford's got a question, and
Yes.
Mr. Pfeiffer's got a question.
Linda, I was wondering, in this study, did they look at age differences?
In this particular study, I don't have the data on age, no.
I was just wondering, too, what the, well, it actually said that. And then I wanted to look at, of the 32% of the U.S. employers, were those in certain industries?
They were across industries. So there were across industries from manufacturing to professional services, government, about 6 major industries that were surveyed. And we can get details for you as well.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering if there was a particular industry or industries where they tended to offer the 4-day.
And that's a great question.
Okay, thank you.
We can find that out.
Mr. Pfeiffer?
And my laptop went dead, so I can't remember. So I might be ahead of myself or not, but this is pre-COVID, right?
Yes.
Did you have a similar survey for post-COVID?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not on this one. This one was at the beginning of this year.
Okay, so it'd be interesting what the feeling is now.
Exactly.
And then, was there any, and I wish I saw this, anything about, we used to call it flex space. So in other words, they didn't have to necessarily come in to work. They can telecommute or work somewhere else as long as they're available. Is there any consideration of certain positions within the city to work telework for now?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with our space and facility needs, this may solve another problem. So I want to make sure if we're trying to think about it, like accountants sorry, Brian, but maybe you guys can work from home. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I could tell you my procurement team works a lot better from home than in the office. So if I can let them all work from home, I would. But that could solve like this evidence space that the police are having or other issues with our facilities. Is that part of all of this study?
Exactly, yes. And with your feedback and input and support, we'd like to explore that further. A key piece of a lot of this research that we've been doing is not only looking at when to work, where to work, but how to work as well. And so since we were on lockdowns and working from home and shutdowns, almost 18% of our organization is remote working and has been remote working. And we're studying those positions more to determine if long-term or permanent remote working can continue to be sustained and successful.
Because the private industry has been doing it for 10 plus years. And it's interesting, I work for government now,
right.
After 25 years in private, and then seeing government evolve. I think there is some benefits around it. It depends on your role, obviously. Police officers can't work remote, right? I mean, well, they're kind of out there all the time, but they can't work from home.
Right.
But there are positions that are, and we should totally leverage that ability. And that also gives maybe, I'd be curious what the survey would say about having that option as retention of employees and recruitment of employees. When it's not always about, I think our society is changing to a point where it's not all about, what I used to say, you shouldn't live to work, but work to live. And I think our society has become more open to that. I think Europe's been doing it for a long time, but now we're more treasuring every moment with our families a little bit more than we have in the past. And I'd just be very curious in those trends and those possibilities. Because people are going to come work for you. just that you have the option, not necessarily
That's right.
the salary, but
That's
you
right.
have these enhanced employment benefits, we'll
Mhm.
say, that maybe not all government usually gives.
That's
So-
right. Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, Mr. Pfeiffer, because just today, we did get a survey released from Employers Council, which is the local employment advocacy
Yeah.
and support group for the Rocky Mountain region. It's a 60-page report on remote working and teleworking, and from employers from Arizona, Utah, Wyoming, Colorado. And so I'll be very curious to see what those have to say, and that will give us some really good data.
Yeah,
to
if we can
help
get
us
a
move
summary
forward
of
as
that,
well.
that would be very nice, Linda.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Simpson?
Thank you. So I was just curious if the study broke out by private industry versus government entity to see if there were any differences there?
It does, and we can provide that detail to you further, yes.
I was just curious, and then I was also going to recommend, I know there are some cities that do this, for instance, Provo, Utah, which is roughly comparable in size to Arvada, and also a suburb of a major city, has done the 4-day work week for years, and they love it. So just an interesting anecdote, maybe a template or something.
Yeah, thank you, and we'll be sharing some more details from some of our local neighbors that are in that 4-day work week model as well as we move forward. So if we could go to the next slide.
Ms. Ford's got a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Linda, I forgot to ask you this question. Do we ever look at our workers in Arvada, the ones who live here in Arvada versus those who don't in terms of tenure, just different variables?
Well, we certainly pay attention to the number of employees that live in the city of Arvada, that work for the city of Arvada, because we think it's a nice data point to share, because so many of our employees do live in Arvada. We haven't looked at that data lately, but it's something that I think we take pride in, because we feel that extra level of commitment to the job and to the community when a community member is actually working for the local government as well. The last data point we had was a few years ago, and it was about 40% of those
40%.
employees work locally or live locally.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. So this survey that we pulled, again, this is also pre-COVID. This was at the beginning of this year, is from Flex Jobs. It's another national survey that was conducted among workers throughout the United States. And this points to what Mr. Pfeiffer was talking about with that need for flexibility and really the very strong trends towards employees being more loyal to their employers if they know they've got flexible work options available to them, and the need for work-life balance. You can see that 30% of workers in the United States left jobs due to the lack of flexible work options. 74% do say that work-life balance is a top factor when they're evaluating a job. 45% are interested in working alternative schedules, and 80% of workers that were surveyed would be more loyal to their employer if they had flexible working options. So important for us to pay attention to, and it will be great to get more of that locally based data from Employers Council as well. So next slide. Just some more quotes from articles and research we've been doing. I'll just share with you that last one. The pandemic is changing the way we think about work, not only where, but on what days. So if we could go to the next slide. So what are others doing? There is the trend with 4-day work weeks. As I mentioned, we found that nationally, but we're also seeing it here locally as well. In the last few months, Jefferson County and Adams County both moved to 4-day work weeks. Jefferson County started that on June 1st. When we asked them why they decided to go with the 4-day work week, they said initially it was driven by budget. They had put together a ballot issue regarding Tabor in 2019, and that was not passed by Jefferson County voters. So they had to make some budget cuts, and part of the reason that they feel the 4-day work week helps is because they are physically shutting down some of their facilities, and so employees are home. It's not open to the public. They're saving on utilities costs. They don't anticipate a lot of savings, and we'll talk about that in the next slide, but that was the driving factor. And they were researching this on the 4-day model pre-COVID, but it drove them to launch quickly once COVID did hit, because they felt the environment was open
And we are in such a disruption state already that moving to a 4-day model with remote service delivery, they did not see as a big disruption. So that was a motivation to launch when they did. Adams County, very similar. So Jefferson County is closed on Fridays to the public. Adams County is closed on Mondays to the public. They are in alignment, I believe, with the school district that also has a 4-day school day with Mondays off. And I think some of their council and commission-related events and required meetings they fall on Tuesdays or later in the week. So they felt Mondays were the best days for them to close. They did that, pushing employee flexibility piece. They definitely see the benefit of recruitment and retention to offer a 4-day model to prospective employees and to keep good quality employees. So that was their driving factor. And again, COVID gave them the launch they felt that they could do quickly. So they started in June as well. Westminster has been on a 4-day model for several years now. And they initially decided to go to the 4-day work week for financial reasons, but they have told us that it has evolved over time to really truly being a customer service as well as employee benefit. So next slide. We also asked them, how did the community react so far to your decisions to move to a 4-day work week? Although it's very early for both Jefferson County and Adams County, again, they just launched these in June of this year. They haven't received any, if many, complaints at all. It's been mostly positive and pretty seamless. Because of the current environment, it's been conducive to allowing this kind of change without a whole lot of disruption for their service levels and for their customers' needs. So both of them have said that, but they also acknowledge too it's a little harder to gauge since they've only been a few months into this. And with the current environment, if we do change anytime soon, that could create some fluctuations as well. Westminster did also fear concern from their community, but they have reported that they feel the opposite has happened. Residents do enjoy that on those 4 days of public services, they have extended hours from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. They've also listened to their community, and over the course of time, they did get feedback to have building permit services offered on Fridays. That tends to be a busy day for building permits, and so they now open half-day Fridays for that purpose. Next slide. So we asked them about cost savings. Again, Jefferson County does predict hard dollar costs, but it shouldn't be extensive. It's really based on the utilities and having to monitor that as these buildings are closed. But they do anticipate some cost savings from that. They, however, feel there's more value and potential savings in the retention of their employees. Having quality employees stay versus having them leave to the competition and facing turnover and the costs to rehire and retrain, they feel are significant. So this is a huge, what they feel, benefit for their employees and for retention and recruitment. Adams County does not expect any hard savings either. They have made note that they're piloting this 4-day work week through the end of this year, and they'll reassess in 2021. Westminster says they really haven't realized significant cost savings from their change, but it has proven to be a service level and employee satisfaction win. So they can translate to more of the soft dollar savings. Next slide. So overall, the benefits and challenges that they reported to us on these 4-day work week or business week models, if you will. As you can see, obviously they are experiencing, even in the short term with Jefferson County and Adams County, increased employee satisfaction, overall productivity, and morale. With the state of our environment as it is right now, it's great to have some sort of a morale boost, and if this has been the case for them, that's great, and it's good to hear. As we can probably assume safely, most people do enjoy having a 3-day weekend, so that's been a huge benefit and a plus for them. They do feel it will be a continual recruitment and retention benefit and tool. They indicate better for the environment in the fact that there's less commuting, less days on the road for vehicles to travel to the office if it's closed 1 day a week, so it's better for the environment. They have also, all 3 of them have made mention that flexibility is key in implementing something like this. So I have it in both the benefits and the challenges, because the benefit is that they've realized that they can offer a lot of flexible options for their employees. For example, even though Jefferson County is closed to the public on Fridays, they can allow employees to work from home or do extra work on Fridays for a half day if they can't work a 10-hour day the day prior, giving them that kind of flexibility to do office work when it's not open to the public is still an option for employees. They've also even said, for additional cost savings, some jobs, as they become vacant, if that job does not need a 40-hour model, could they offer it at 4 days, 32 hours a week, so 4 8-hour days, which is proving to be a popular option for employees as well, who may want to not work a full 40 hours, but they would like 32, some who might be on the verge of retirement, for example. But Jefferson County only does that when they know that the business levels and the demands needed for that job can still be met in those shorter hours. Just knowing that they've got that flexibility has been a big push for them. So challenges, as you can see, a 4-10, a 4-day work week is not for everyone. There are simply employees that do not like it at all. It can create exhaustion for some. There are employees who have families who have said, what do we do for childcare on these extended hours? And when am I ever going to see my family if I'm in work so early and I'm still at work so late? So we've heard those reports from employees as well. Administratively managing this can be a challenge, and so it's something we need to pay attention to if we're going to consider it down the road. We do realize as a local government there are different work teams and different needs across the board, and that really has to be the driver with this is flexibility, not a one-size-fits-all kind of approach. Adams County also reports that they launched very quickly and it's created some confusion, so lessons learned from them need to go slow and smart in something like this. So next slide, please. So as we close this out, what does work for Arvada? We need to figure that out, and we do want to conduct further research. We are very much interested in making this an important priority for us, not only on the service delivery side, but on the workforce and work support side, because we know that we're in this uncertain time for quite some time, and we also know that these fundamental changes are here to stay. So we realize if we continue to look into this, we must sustain our service levels and really look towards enhancing them, as well as ensuring that we're being flexible to meet the varying needs of our individual employees and our work teams. So leadership team has started discussions, but we need to have some more. We have varying opinions even on leadership teams, so it's quite interesting to continue to explore this. Obviously, with your support, we would need to survey our employees and hear from them. We don't know what works best for Arvada until we hear from our employees, and just as importantly, we need to gauge the community needs as well. So with that, I open it up to questions.
Okay. Ms. Ford.
I had one thought as you were talking, looking at the folks who work with utilities and, on emergency situations, that it would probably make sense to have a flexible schedule where not everybody's working the same days, 10 hours, if say they did go on to this type of a schedule, because then you'd incur a lot of extra overtime.
That's right.
So.
Yeah, great point. Thank you.
Mr. Marriott.
Thank you. So not necessarily a question, but kind of a statement, and I might suggest that we add this to our council retreat next year or after the first of the year and talk about this, particularly the service delivery part, giving these new ways of delivering services, and of course it meshes with this 4-day work week. One of the things about government is that our customers can't go elsewhere. So if I'm running a private business and I decide I want to be closed on any day or days, I can do that, and the customers that I have potentially can go other places to get those services. But there is only one place to get a police report or a building permit or deal with a code enforcement issue or any number of things that government assumes the role of. And so I would just want to make sure that these new ways of delivering the services, they're an enhancement to the way people can access these services and not an instead of. And
Agreed.
I think maybe we can have a goal about that, whether that's a council strategic result or a goal, and it's certainly probably something we can talk about as we go forward. But I would just make sure, I would want to make sure that as we engage in these types of conversations, that what's best for our employees is one component of it, but what's best for our customers, and our customers really is all of our taxpayers and our residents that access government services, that they play the biggest part in it, and that we don't lose sight of that and just take for granted that they will have to do whatever it is we decide they're going to do. That's actually factually correct. We could decide that we only issue building permits on Tuesdays and there's nothing they can do about it, but it doesn't make it right. So I just want to make sure we're conscious of that, and as we go forward with these discussions, that we always keep that in the forefront, that the public, the customers need to have the access they have now plus enhanced would be the best situation. So,
Absolutely.
Mr. Fiver?
Kind of going on those lines, you see the trend of self-service. I mean, when you think of service delivery now, it's a lot different, right? I mean, I'm thinking, we got so used to doing things at home and getting things delivered, or, food now delivered. I mean, you got everything delivered and everything's online. Everything's online. And, looking at, it's working for the state, how we're looking at how can employees and customers interact through applications or apps on your phone, and not have to ever come in and still provide the level of service that's expected.
Right.
I think we're in a catapult right now where we're being launched into a new world of service delivery. And so, even though we should still allow in person, I think we need to balance that with some modernization of how we do things, especially because all of society jumped over the last 6 months further advanced than before. I mean, how many of our, I have great-grandparents still alive that now know how to work Zoom, and they were born way before World War II happened, if not at the tail end of World War I, right? So now you have people doing things that you would never thought they would do. So what I would say is continue down the path, look at the flexibility, know your customer, but then keep in mind of how do we structurally set ourselves up for success before we start making too much changes in the way we operate today, so that we can get people trained. We do need Ask Arvada up. We need maybe some enhancements on our website. We need to maybe create an app. We need probably some communication help, right? I mean, all of that has to be done first before we can pull a ripcord on any of this. I will tell you, my experience, the state had 8-hour, 9-hour, and 10-hour work weeks, and it was up to the manager to decide, or the director. We just recently got rid of 9-hour work weeks, but the reason was the system prevented that, and system should not drive process. But in return, we did 10-hour work weeks, and we let people pick their one day off in the week. So we're still open from 5 days a week for a 10-hour shift, and still provide a level of service. So keep those things in mind as well, that that gives flexibility. And we peppered in 8-hour people inside the 10-hour teams, because that gave some overlay and some flexibility with some folks. So just creative. I think the way we should look at this subject is, here are the things we should not ever do. Like, we should never close City Hall. City Hall should never be closed 7 days a week. Allow everything else be open range. And figure out that the confinement should be fenced in. We should just say, just don't do the thing in the middle that you shouldn't do. So let's look for those kind of opportunities, and then have you come back and be creative. You did that once with the health benefits. Let's do it with the work week now. Okay, thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
Yes, other lights, let me make a couple comments. First of all, I must be getting long in the tooth or whatever, but it's been sort of kicking and screaming, and Mr. Devin will tell you that when the concept first came up of should we go to a 4-day work week, I was sort of the hell no kind of guy, because I don't want to see a reduction in service. because that's the number one priority.
Right.
I look at what Jefferson County did, and frankly, I looked at it as some people wanting to punish the voters for not going the way they wanted them to on the Tabor issue. And I don't want this to be seen by our citizens as a punishment for anything. I applaud you for wanting to look at it. I think 2020 has made us look at everything, and this is an appropriate thing to look at. But I'm going to want employee input, and I'm going to want citizen input, and I want to make sure that we don't have a reduction, and that it truly is an enhancement for any changes that we make moving forward. I struggle with the whole work at home. And part of that is because I don't work worth a darn at home. I've got too many distractions and too many other things I'd rather be doing when I'm at home. And so, I'm looking at the universe and saying, are people really doing their jobs at home, or are they watching CNN and doing other stuff, or even maybe Fox News? But I want to, and I think we've got to do a lot of work yet here at the city in terms of our efficiencies with the people who are working remotely. It may be working great. I'm just taking myself saying, I'm not very efficient in my law practice working from home. I need to be behind my desk, dealing with what I need to deal with from there. But I'm old-fashioned, and that's the way I am. But and maybe for other people it works a lot better working remotely. But there seems like there's so many distractions between kids and family and everything else, that are a lot more fun than doing your job. So those are issues that I think we've got to deal with in this whole arena. But yes, we should have the discussion. I think Mr. Marriott's exactly right. This is a great topic for our annual get-together, for our retreat, but there's a lot of more work that's got to be done on it. Mr. Fiver.
Yeah, Mayor, and I appreciate that concern because I was probably with you on that until, I have worked at home, I have worked in the office, and I've worked in a hybrid. I go to the office, I'm an essential employee half the week, and I work from home. What I can assure you, my productivity of my division probably jumped. Now, I can't say it's perfectly. There's certain weeks I'm like, I wonder, but for the most part, I can tell you I saw more productivity. And personally, right, wrong, or indifferent, I catch myself probably working more because when you walk by your office, you're like, oh, I could grab these emails real quick and just knock them out. And next thing you know, you're there for 3 hours. And now I tell my employees, your office is not your dining room. You have to make a segregated area different because, one, you may either separate or you may watch Fox News all day, however your day goes. But you don't separate personal and your work life when you're sitting in your living room or on your kitchen table. But I can tell you certain days I work 8 hours and then all of a sudden I work 8 hours on Saturday. So I know it's hard to believe, but I do believe that the employees, like I said, procurement, I don't know how the procurement works here, but my procurement went from 6 months of getting crop out to literally a day or two. And I don't know what changed, but they're all working from home, and I'm not going to disturb that because I want my 2-day turnaround. But there's just productivity that I think you can measure. I have checked to make sure people are logging in. There's things that you do, but if you want. But for the most part, I can say hybrid approaches are very open. I'm very supportive of hybrid, where they work maybe home for a few days, come in the office a few days. But I feel comfortable with it. It's weird. I think I would never have said this maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, but I don't know. It's definitely a different world now.
2020's changed everything.
Yeah. Holy cow, yeah.
Okay, I see no other lights. Excellent report, good work.
Thank you.
Lots more to be done.
Absolutely.
Okay, Mr. Devon, anything else you've got?
No, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for all your feedback tonight. We appreciate it, and we'll be getting back to you on some of the issues that you brought up.
Great, thank you.